Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are here right on time tonight. It is Saturday night. I'm in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, and we are going to have a great show. We're going to have a lot of things to talk about. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's have a great conversation here tonight. It's going to be a little bit different. I've got a new angle tonight, but it'll be good. Let's start.
American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting show tonight because there's so many things that have happened in the news this week that I've got to talk about. And yeah, I've got a lot of clips to show. Let me just put it that way. I could get on here and just prepare to make a really wild speech. But instead of doing that, I'm going to show you a lot of clips tonight and react to them and talk to you all about them. That's kind of what we're doing for the opening remarks. That's going to be kind of interesting. I got a lot of things that have happened, a lot of things that deserve to be shown on the screen here. I will be showing to you in my opening remarks tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. The way this works, for those of you who may not be familiar, is that I give my opening remarks, and my opening remarks are then followed by the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We find out who's on the other side of the camera, who's watching, the community. And then after that, I then answer super chat questions for the rest of the night. I answer your super chat questions. So as the super chats are coming in, I will be writing them down, or typing them down, rather. I'll be typing down the super chats. Then after the roll call is over, I will start answering your super chat questions. That's the way we do it. That's the way the cookie crumbles. It's going to be awesome. But Gavin beat me to the punch. Go sign up March 25th and 26th. There's going to be a very amazing conference. There's going to be an amazing conference in Washington, D.C. called by the Center for Political Innovation. The link is there in the chat. The link is also down below. Please register for that conference. We need you there. It is going to be awesome. Scott Ritter is coming. Nick Brana is coming. Garland Nixon is coming. May even be some more special guests. WBAI, Daniel Villa is coming. Don DeBar, longtime anti-war activist. Peter Coffin, the great Peter Coffin, is coming. Jyoti Brar, the leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, and the founder of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, a well-known communist from the UK, is coming. It is turning into something. It is really turning into something, this conference. And it may even be turning into something more than this. So you don't want to miss it. If there's any way you can make it in person, you want to be there. Will not be live streamed. There'll be video afterwards, but it will not be live streamed. If you want to be part of the experience, you got to be there. And if you want to send us a donation to help us cover it, because it is adding up. So, if you want to help us cover it, we appreciate donations. That is one way to help us out. Patreon fans, in the next few days, there will be a patrons only stream. I owe it to you. I'm behind on that, and I do apologize. There will be a patrons only stream soon. I am behind, and there will be one. And it's not too late if you want to be part of the upcoming patrons only stream. Since we haven't done it yet, since I'm behind, you can sign up today and you can become a dues paying member on Patreon. You can join the Patreon. Another thing you can do is, if you want to be part of exciting things that we do, you can just become a member of the Center for Political Innovation. We get new memberships all the time. People are joining from across the country. We could always use new members and plug you into things like the conferences or the trainings. We're training people to give classes on anti-imperialism, and we're doing all kinds of great stuff. You know, it's going to be great. Like I mentioned before, everyone who attends our upcoming conference will get a copy of my new book free. They're in a box right over here. I got hundreds of copies of this new book, and you'll get a free one if you come to the conference. Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. Everyone who attends will get a free copy. It's going to be a great conference. It's going to be a great conference. So make sure that you register. Make sure that you register to attend the Summit Against Hypocrisy. It's our answer to Joe Biden's Democracy Summit. It will be an anti-imperialist gathering that's taking place in Washington, D.C. You will be able to attend, and we would love to have you there. We would love to have you there. So by all means, sign up. I'm going to have more to say about it later in the program, and I'm plugging it a lot. And a lot of other people are plugging it. Some people have made some great videos, and we're going to talk about that later in the program. But we're going to, at this point, we're going to get down to some of the news that has happened this week. Because there's a lot of news items that we can talk about. But first things first, why don't we start out? I don't even know where to start. But why don't we start out with this? Folks, the internet is rigged. Let me emphasize that. The internet is rigged. The internet is rigged. Social media is rigged. And people like me have known that for a long time. Social media is rigged to silence anti-imperialists, to cancel people that are against the status quo, to promote whatever the establishment is promoting, to suppress whatever the establishment is suppressing, to demonize Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela, to demonize dissident voices, to prop up the deep state, the FBI, the CIA, and what they want to promote. We now know it's rigged thanks to something called the Twitter files. Now, we all knew it was rigged for a long time, but now we have proof that it's rigged. Matt Taibbi was leaked all kinds of information. He provided the Twitter files, and now he's testified about it before Congress. And I just want to show you some highlights, thanks to the social media, the Twitter of Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate. I'm going to show you some highlights from Matt Taibbi's recent testimony before the U.S. Congress about how social media is rigged. This is testimony before the U.S. Congress by journalist Matt Taibbi. There's a lot of great clips here. But anyone who tries to tell you, oh, no, it's not rigged, it's just whatever is popular, it doesn't know what they're talking about. This is journalist Matt Taibbi before the U.S. Congress.
Member Plaskett, I would note that the evidence of Twitter-government relationship includes lists of tens of thousands of names on both the left and right. The people affected include Trump supporters, but also left-leaning sites like Consortium and Truth Out, the leftist South American channel Telesur, the Yellow Vest movement. That, in fact, is a key point of the Twitter files, that it's neither a left nor right issue.
Did you hear that? It's neither a left nor right issue. They suppress Trump supporters, but they also suppress Telesur, the TV network from Venezuela, a socialist country. They also suppress anti-war websites like Consortium News. And it's really important that he said this. I'm going to show Matt Taibbi say this one more time. It's really important because this is a really important thing to point out. They suppress both left and right voices. They have a whole list of people, Twitter has, that they have rigged social media against. They've rigged Twitter against certain people. Here's what he said.
Again, Ranking Member Plaskett, I would note that the evidence of Twitter-government relationship includes lists of tens of thousands of names on both the left and right.
Tens of thousands of names. There's tens of thousands of people that the FBI and the CIA have gone to Twitter and said, make sure people don't listen to them. Now, is that democracy? That's bullshit, is what that is. Can you imagine this? In a so-called democracy, in a place where there's an open, free market of ideas, we have the FBI and the CIA and the deep state going to social media companies and providing a list of tens of thousands of people and saying, we don't want people to listen to them. Can you make sure people don't listen to them?
People affected include Trump supporters, but also left-leaning sites like Consortium and Truth Out.
Consortium and Truce Out, left-leaning leaning
The
sites.
leftist South American channel Telesur.
The leftist South American channel Telesur.
The Yellow Vest movement.
The Yellow Vest movement in France, the working class uprising in France.
That, in fact, is a key point of the Twitter files, that it's neither a left nor right issue.
It's neither a left nor right issue. And this is really important because what do all the stupid liberals say if you ever bring this up? All the Rachel Maddow fans, if you bring this up, they're like, that's right wing. That's right wing. That's a right wing conspiracy theory. No, sir, it is not rigged. Social media is not rigged. If you think that, sir, you are a right winger. Thinking that Twitter and social media is rigged makes you like a neo-Nazi. Everything we see on Twitter and social media is good for us, and it's good that the government is deciding what we watch, because if you're against it, you must be a neo-Nazi. Oh my God, a neo-Nazi, right? Well, it's not just right-wing, it's left-wing. People like me that are leftists and have a mile-long credential as leftists, but we dare stand up against their wars. We dare stick to working class politics, and we don't jump on the woke bandwagon. We don't make every conversation about pronouns and genitals. And because of that, they have rigged it against us as well. So no, it is not a right-wing thing. And also, even if it was, just pointing at something and saying, that's right-wing, that doesn't make it wrong. You know, I mean, if George W. Bush said the sky is blue, if Donald Trump said the sky is blue, would the sky not be blue? I mean, if Donald Trump said the sky is blue, and I said, well, you know, I heard, you know, Donald Trump said the sky is blue. Oh my God, he's spreading Trumpian conspiracy theories. Well, maybe it's true. Maybe it's true. You know, I mean, it's like they have brainwashed. The way the neoconservatives used to be is the way the liberals are now. It used to be during the Bush years, if you said, hey, there weren't any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, they'd be like, oh my God, are you a liberal? Do you hate America? Are you working for the terrorists? And now it's the same kind of mindset. If you say social media is rigged, they say, oh my God, are you a neo-Nazi? You must be a white supremacist. Oh my God, you're in QAnon. Oh my God, you're questioning. I mean, it's the same mindset. These people that are just establishment drones. That is the people that you have to talk to. And he just pointed out there, it is not an issue of left or right. It is certain ideas that the deep state, the FBI, the CIA, the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, the powerful entities that dominate U.S. society, the big monopolies, don't want to get out there. It's not left or right. It's anti-establishment versus establishment. And there's so many other great clips from the Matt Taibbi testimony before Congress. Let's bring them up. The reactions of the members of Congress to him are particularly crazy. Here's another one.
Back on your ethics, you weren't given really an opportunity to answer. And if you'd be brief, I've got a bunch of stuff I want to ask you as well.
Sure, just quickly, that moment on the Joe Rogan show, I was actually recounting a section from Seymour Hersh's book, Reporter, where he described a scene where the CIA gave him a story, and he was very uncomfortable. He said that I, who had always gotten the secrets, was being handed the secrets. Look, again, I've done lots of whistleblower stories. There's always a balancing test that you make when you're given material, and you're always balancing newsworthiness versus the motives of your sources. In this case, the newsworthiness clearly outweighed any other considerations, and I think everybody else who worked on the project agreed.
Now, what Matt Taibbi is responding to here is this argument of like, oh my God, Elon Musk is right-wing, and he gave this to you. Don't you think he's using this to push his right-wing agenda? And he's saying, yeah, you know, whenever someone gives you information, you have to balance whether it's newsworthy. You have to verify that it's true and why they might be sending it to you. But in this instance, yes, Elon Musk, for his own reasons, decided to provide this information to Matt Taibbi, and he ethically felt that the fact that the government is colluding with Twitter to try and manipulate political discourse in America is worth reporting on. And he's responding to these dumb argument, well, Elon Musk gave it to you because he has an agenda. Maybe, But, if Elon Musk revealed, that a child molester was raping a bunch of children, would you say, oh, I can't go report that to the police because Elon Musk has an agenda? Of course not. Right? I mean, something wrong is happening, which is that the government is colluding with Twitter to suppress people with dissident views. And it doesn't matter if Elon Musk or the devil himself or Adolf Hitler provided the information. If Matt Taibbi can verify that it's true, which he did verify that these are real emails. It wasn't a fraud. It wasn't fake emails. And he did verify that indeed the FBI is cooperating with Twitter to try and suppress anti-imperialist views. Doesn't matter if Elon Musk gave it to him because he has an agenda. It's true, right? So that's just a bullshit argument, and he defended himself from that point. Here's some more Matt Taibbi testimony. This stuff is gold. And the Congress members responding to him. I mean, it gets rich. It gets rich. This is a member of Congress talking to Matt Taibbi.
I hope that you can actually take this with you, because I honestly hope that you will grapple with this. That it may be possible that if we can take off the tinfoil hat, that there's not a vast conspiracy, but that ordinary folks and national security agencies responsible for our security are trying their best to find a way to make sure that our online discourse doesn't get people hurt or see our democracy undermined. And that the very rights that you think they're trying to undermine, they may be trying to protect.
Can you please just have faith in our leaders? Can you please just trust the people that are suppressing certain views? Can you just take off your tinfoil hat for a minute and say that they're just trying to keep us safe, and that's why they don't want people criticizing the U.S. invasion of Iraq, and that's why they don't want people criticizing us sending weapons to terrorists, and that's why they don't want people talking about the heroin gangs in Afghanistan? Can't you just take off your tinfoil hat and be like me, be a true blind believer, and assume that the American deep state is just gonna do the right thing? Don't you love that? Don't you love that? And it's like, what that guy is doing there is like the very people that rig social media can help him win an election. That's what's going on there. And that guy's elected to Congress, and he wants the backing of the deep state. He wants the algorithms to be rigged in his favor. He wants negative news stories about him to go bye-bye. And he wants positive stories about him to go everywhere. And he wants negative stories about his opponents. And so he's saying, don't you think we should just trust the deep state? Don't you think we should just trust the FBI? Are you listening, guys? I'm defending you from this hooligan. I'm helping you rig the algorithms. So can you rig it for me? That's what he's saying here. That's what he's saying here. And it's just like he's not even making, can't you just take off the tinfoil hat? That's not an argument. And this is one thing that really, really annoys me. Whenever they're defending themselves, whenever the establishment is defending themselves, they fall back on this. You'll notice, I'll play the clip again. Does he at any point say that anything Matt Taibbi said was false? Does he debunk it? Does he put forward a single argument to debunk anything Matt Taibbi said? Listen for any argument here. Is there a single logical fallacy, factual inaccuracy he points to? Is there anything that Matt Taibbi says that he debunks here?
And I hope that you can actually take this with you, because I honestly hope that you will grapple with this.
Not an argument.
That it may be possible that if we can take off the tinfoil hat,
not an argument,
that there's not a vast conspiracy,
not an argument,
but that ordinary folks and national security agencies responsible for our security are trying their best,
not an argument,
to find a way to make sure that our online discourse doesn't get people hurt,
not an argument,
or see our democracy undermined.
Not an argument.
And that the very rights that you think they're trying to undermine, they may be trying to protect.
Not an argument. Like that, none of that is an argument against anything he said. What if you were like, there was a murder trial, and they put the prosecution put forward all kinds of evidence that this person was guilty of murder, and they showed the knife and his fingerprints on the knife, and then he gets up in front of the jury, and let's just for a moment imagine that maybe he didn't do it. And maybe There's no vast conspiracy. I mean, maybe all the evidence put forward isn't true. Let's just imagine for a minute that the defendant is completely innocent. Let's just imagine, take the tinfoil hat off your head. Now, that's not an argument. That's not an argument. I mean, this is like ridiculous. And this is the same kind of like, this is like normie bullying, right? It's when they say take the tinfoil hat off your head, what they're saying is you don't want to be one of those crazy people who thinks wrong. You don't want people to point at you and laugh. You don't want to get canceled on social media for thinking wrong, right? So you're a good person who follows the rules and doesn't get bullied for being a dissident, right? And they always do this. And it's like they use arguments like everybody knows. At one point I was at the US State Department. And I asked Heather Nauert a question about a chemical weapons attack. And she replied with, everybody knows. Well, everyone knows is not an argument. And everyone does not know. There's a lot of dissident, questions regarding chemical weapons in Syria and all that. And she just said, well, everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. That's not an argument. Everybody knows is not an argument. There's no vast conspiracy. It's not an argument. Take the tinfoil hat off your head. It's not an argument. If someone puts forward an allegation and has evidence to back it up, which Twitter files, there's loads of emails, documented emails that actually happened to back up everything Matt Taibbi says. The whole reason he did this is because Elon Musk became the leader of Twitter and gave him all these documents proving that social media is being rigged to suppress dissidents. And then he presented what was actually there. And you saying take the tinfoil hat off your head or say there's no vast conspiracy, the emails are there. We see the communication between the Twitter employees and the FBI. We see it with our own eyes. The smoking gun is there. It's infuriating to watch people do this, especially when they're doing it to shill for the establishment. These are the politicians that are going to be like, I'm going to fight for you. No, you're not. You're going to call us crazy. Here's another one.
That you disagree with the two indictments by special counsel Robert Mueller that definitively established that Russia interfered in our 2016 election through social media disinformation and a hack and leak operation?
No, I don't disagree.
Okay, Mr. Taibbi, do you disagree with those two indictments?
Well, how do you there are things in indictments that turn out not to be true all the time. People, when they're indicted, the indictment will say one thing, and by the time the prosecutor has done all kinds of investigation and they have an actual trial, the actual evidence and the narrative of the prosecution is completely different at the trial.
Well, indictments aren't a thing to disagree.
Do you disagree?
An indictment, that's just the government bringing charges against somebody. That's all an indictment is. So they're asking him, do you disagree with these indictments? It's like, how should he know?
They're about 40 or 50 pages. Do you disagree?
Oh, they're long. Oh, they're 40 or 50 pages. They must be true. Now, do you agree that this thing that a prosecutor wrote to bring charges against someone, do you disagree with it? Well,
with the evidence outlined in those indictments.
Well, indictments are just charges.
I just asked you, do you
indictments are just charges. He's pointing out indictments are just charges.
Disagree with the evidence included in those indictments? Yes or no?
I'm not on the jury of that case. I couldn't possibly say yes or no.
Okay, because
and so they're asking him about a case. They're asking him if he agrees with something federal prosecutors put forward, and he's like, "What? I don't know. I haven't. I mean, this is an absurd question."
You said earlier, I believe, that you did not see Russia. You could not confirm that Russia interfered in our election in 2016. That you don't believe that. Is that your testimony here today? You don't believe that they did?
I think it's possible that they may have on a small scale, but certainly not to what's been reported.
What's been reported or what's been included in the indictments?
Well, again, indictments are allegations. They're not proof. And
I understand. It's pretty detailed allegations.
In the Mueller.
Yeah, and they're asking him to verify something that the federal prosecutors wrote.
Indictment, by the way.
You should go read the indictment and then come back and tell us if you actually think there's no proof of it.
Well,
but let me move on.
Some of the.
I mean, it's like he's saying, I don't know what is exactly in this indictment, but why should I confirm that it's true just because it's in a federal indictment?
By the way,
please let me move on. That's how this works. You should know that by now. So do you disagree with the special counsel Mueller's conclusion in his report, Mr. Taibbi, that the Trump campaign knew about Russia's interference, they welcomed it, and they used it for their benefit? You have no reason to disagree with that, don't you? You have no information. So after that foreign interference in our 2016 election, Twitter and other social media companies naturally wanted to work with the intelligence community to stop Vladimir Putin from interfering in our elections again. Mr. Taibbi, do you think it's a legitimate pursuit of the FBI to try to stop foreign interference in our elections?
Again, sir, will I be allowed to answer this question, or
It's a yes or no question. Do you think it's a legitimate pursuit of the FBI?
it's not a yes or no answer?
No. I'm not asking how. I'm saying, as an objective, do you think it's a legitimate objective of the FBI to stop foreign interference in our elections?
I think it's a legitimate objective to stop actual foreign interference.
Okay.
Yeah,
But isn't your
obviously,
testimony-
right? If there was like a foreign government that was going to rig the voting machines or something, sure. If there was a foreign government that was gonna, cause the electricity to go out so that no one could go vote that day and suppress voter turnout, sure. But the FBI going after people on social media who post memes, people on social media who tweet things and might be disagreeing with the prevailing narrative and feeding into Russian narrative, that's ridiculous, right? I mean, it's the whole thing is just particularly ridiculous. But that's some of what we saw. Let me see. Do I have more of Matt Taibbi? Do I have more here? I might not. But yeah, that was something. I wanted to share that with all of you. So that was the Matt Taibbi testimony. The other thing is this Nord Stream 2 thing, right? I mean, I wanted to talk about that, Nord Stream 2, because, I mean, everyone knows at this point that the U.S. government, the White House, destroyed the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline. The next time they start talking about climate change and clean air and clean water, be like, yeah, you blew up a natural gas pipeline. You know, the next time they say we love our NATO allies, say like, yeah, you blew up a natural gas pipeline. I mean, it's particularly ridiculous the way that they're trying to present themselves at this point. I mean, it doesn't get more utterly ridiculous than this. They blew up a natural gas pipeline. They committed a very illegal act. They're now trying to say, well, they didn't do it. A pro-Ukrainian group did it. No one's buying it. Seymour Hersh has evidence. No one's buying it. And everyone's looking at the evidence from Seymour Hersh, and they're saying, okay, we've seen the evidence here. We've seen the evidence. You're backtracking. They're not buying it. And we have a situation where the world has seen the evidence, the emails, etc. Seymour Hersh has come forward and shown that the White House blew up the natural gas pipeline, blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. They're trying to dance around it and say, well, it was actually a pro-Ukrainian group that did it. Tulsi Gabbard is once again proving herself to be one of the only people in the U.S. government who, has any courage. So let's pull up Tulsi. Let's pull up. This is a Tucker Carlson segment where Tulsi Gabbard talks about it. This is Tulsi Gabbard.
Been kind of forgotten, but Toria Nuland, who was the driving force behind the war in Ukraine, helped start the war in Ukraine, in January threatened to blow up the Nord Stream pipelines so that Russia couldn't send gas to Europe. Remember?
Little important detail is the White House, Victoria Nuland, and Joe Biden's White House threatened to blow up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So if they were never going to do such a thing, why would they threaten to do it?
I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
But they would never do such a thing, Caleb. Take the tinfoil hat off your head. Take the tinfoil hat off your head. They would never do such a thing, even though they threatened to do the very thing they said that they would never do.
So then in September, somebody blew up the pipelines, and that was the biggest man-made environmental disaster in history. If you're worried about climate change, you should be in tears because of the amount of carbon that emitted into the atmosphere. So it was pretty obvious to us the Biden administration was involved in this. We said that, and we were immediately denounced by the entire left and the entire media as agents of Putin. Why are they doing that? And by the way, when we actually join this war in force, what will they do to anyone who objects to it? Ooh, they're going to punish people. You watch. But with this in mind, we were a little bit surprised to see Toria Nuland essentially admit last week that she did it. Watch this.
Senator Cruz, like you, I am, and I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea.
Oh, she's excited about it. When it happened, they said, we're upset about it. We have no idea who did this. And if you think we had a hand in it, you're Putin. What are we watching here? Tulsi Gabbard is a former presidential candidate. She joins us tonight. Congresswoman, thank you so much for coming on. So now they're basically admitting it and nobody is saying anything? Why?
Well, I think there's two really important things for the American people to take away from what you have just outlined here. Number one is that statement from Victoria Nuland just exposed her and the administration's truth, which is that they have been lying to us all along about this. There's no way the United States was not either involved or knew about this or at the very minimum approved it. So they've been lying to us. They've been deceiving us, saying, hey, look, the United States had absolutely nothing to do with this, while also trying to sell us the absurd lie that, well, of course, Russia somehow bombed their own, exploded their own energy infrastructure to hurt their own economic interests. That it just shows how stupid they think we are, that we would buy such an absurd argument. Their lying to us shows us yet again that we can't trust anything that they're saying. We can't trust any of these narratives that are coming out of the mainstream media. The second thing that's important to recognize that is very dangerous is that they are setting a precedent through what her statements are and their actions, that now that it is acceptable to go and essentially use sabotage against infrastructure as an acceptable strategy. So we have to look at our own vulnerabilities in this area, whether it's the undersea cables, our communication systems, our financial systems, our own power grid and energy system vulnerabilities. The list goes on and on. The argument is very clear. Hey, look, if it's okay to go after and bomb and destroy Russia's oil and gas infrastructure, why would it not then be okay for someone else to come and attack our own, exploit our own vulnerabilities here? So this
is great what she's saying. This is tremendous what she's saying.
This is the position that the warmongers in Washington have put us into, we the American people, all in the name of saying, hey, we're doing this to protect you. We're trying to protect democracy, but their actions are making us less safe and undermining our democracy, because we cannot have a functioning democracy if we can't trust what our leaders are telling us.
Wow, this is the top news program on American television. Fox News, Tucker Carlson, we have a member of Congress, an active duty U.S. military person saying the truth that no one else will acknowledge.
Well, and they don't care about democracy at all. But mark my word, anyone who calls them out on their lies, they've already denounced you, for example, as a disloyal American who serves our country in uniform. If this war accelerates, they will go after you and everyone else who's called them on their lies.
And he's warning about the crackdown these people would plan if they end up having World War III. I mean, this is great.
That's where it's up to the American people. We're the only, like, where is their hope? The hope lies in our hands to fire, get rid of throw these lying, warmongering politicians out of office, and stop listening to the crap the mainstream media and big tech is putting out, and take a stand for the truth for our country and for our security and freedom.
Amen. Tulsi Gabbard, great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Folks, one thing I want you all to understand is that Tulsi Gabbard, what she just said on national TV, is so important. The fact that she is a former member of Congress, that she is an active duty U.S. military person, that's a good thing. It's good. It's very, very good that on national television, a former member of Congress who's active duty with the U.S. military, is tied in with the U.S. deep state and their operations. It's really good that she's talking this way. It's a really, really good thing. And it's like every time I show a Tulsi Gabbard clip, I get people that are mad about other things that she says that are not good. Do you think that somebody who's a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, somebody who's part of the U.S. Pentagon apparatus, you think they don't have skeletons in their closet? You think they're not doing evil work? But the fact that within the deep state, within the evil apparatus of the American government, there are people who think that that kind of thing should be said on TV. That's a really, really good thing. That's a really, really good thing. And it means that there's potential for alliances to be made. There is a section of the deep state that to some degree or other thinks it was bad for us to send weapons to terrorists in Syria, thinks it's bad for us to be inching closer to World War III with Russia, thinks it's bad to blow up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That's a good thing. More people need to hear people talk like that. And I'm tired of the internet purity. When people get all fired up about, oh, Tulsi Gabbard, she's this, she's that. Yeah, but she also does good things. And that's good. That's good. I'm not trying to tell you Tulsi Gabbard is a moral, the voice of all things morality. We should endorse everything she said. But the fact that she is who she is and she's saying what she's saying means there could be an opening for some kind of anti-imperialist united front. And that's amazingly important. That's amazingly important. That is so astronomically important. It's a good thing. She said what she said. Deal with it. Exactly. It's a very, very good thing that somebody in the position that she's in is able to get on a television show with this kind of audience and say these good things. And I don't get it when people are just like, oh, yeah, well, she said this other thing that was bullshit. It's like, okay, great. Okay, great. Yeah, very good. All right. Yeah, very good. Very, very good. All right. She's not a communist. I never said Tulsi Gabbard was a communist. Never said she was a full-on anti-imperialist. She's not. But she is with a section of the military apparatus and the establishment that is willing to promote messages like this. That's a door that has been opened. Walk through it. Don't just curse it. Walk through it. And I mean, the part of being an internet leftist is you just sit on the internet and go, everyone's bad. I'm mad at the world. And you can do that if you want, but you're not going to ever accomplish anything. This is a door that has opened. Walk through it. And it's the wrong kind of mindset to just sit here and go, yeah, well, she's not. I mean, yeah, okay, we can criticize Tulsi Gabbard all you want, but compared to every other voice on national television, compared to every other voice in the U.S. military, like, this is a good sign. Please, I'm begging you to just think for a moment about how we can actually get something done and how we can actually stop the danger of a new world war, and not how we can just feel good about ourselves on the internet, and not how we can just say, well, she's not what, I mean, people don't get it. People really, really don't get it. By the way, I am writing down super chats for the second half of the show. If there's something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, I would be happy to do so. So I'll be writing down super chats if anyone has anything they want me to talk about in the second half of the show. But I've got plenty more stuff to talk about on here. Another thing I wanted to mention that's been in the news, and I don't know if you saw this, but Iran and Saudi Arabia now have diplomatic relations with each other again. Saudi Arabia is a U.S.-aligned Muslim country, a brutal autocracy that cuts people's heads off and tortures people. And Netanyahu and Donald Trump, their foreign policy objective was to unify the Arab world against Iran, to build an Arab NATO that would fight Iran. And in Yemen, Iran is aligned with the people of Yemen that are fighting for the independence of their country. Saudi Arabia is bombarding Yemen, blockading Yemen, killing people to try and keep Yemen under the boot heels of imperialism. And after the Iran nuclear deal was signed, Saudi Arabia was angry about it because Iran is their competitor and sells oil in competition with them. And so Saudi Arabia executed Ayatollah Namir al-Nimr, who is the highest ranking Shia Muslim in Saudi Arabia. They cut his head off. And after that, the Iranians were also Shia Muslims. They stormed into the Saudi embassy. There was like a riot. The hardline Muslims in Iran were so outraged, they stormed into the Saudi embassy. And at that point, Iran and Saudi Arabia cut off relations with each other. And Donald Trump went to Saudi Arabia and was saying to the Saudis that he wanted to build an Arab NATO to fight Iran. And Israel established relations with Dubai and with the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. So Israel started Arab countries, the Muslim countries, the Arab countries have long said that they will never cooperate with Israel. But in the name of fighting Iran, some Muslim countries started to make friends with Israel to kind of unite against Iran. And that was Netanyahu and Donald Trump's right-wing strategy. Isolate Iran, start selling weapons in the Arab world and set up for a war against Iran, led by Israel. But now, thanks to the People's Republic of China, Iran and Saudi Arabia once again have relations. China facilitated negotiations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and now Saudi Arabia and Iran are getting along. That's a really good move. That means that Netanyahu and what he was planning to do and what Trump was going along with, Trump was bad in many ways, and what Trump did with the Middle East, with killing the Iran nuclear deal, murdering Qasem Soleimani, the way Trump was aligning himself with Netanyahu and with the hard right in Israel, that was bad. It was very, very bad. Thank you for the super chat. It was very, very bad. And it seems to have failed. Now, a big part of this is the fact that the United States put a huge amount of pressure on Saudi Arabia to go along with the hostility to Russia, to denounce Russia over the Ukraine situation and all of that. And Saudi Arabia was like, no, we ain't going to do that, because Russia is a major oil exporting country, and Saudi Arabia is also a major oil exporting country. And Saudi Arabia has to negotiate oil price output and oil production with Putin, the Saudi king, the Saudi crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and Putin have to be able to call each other and negotiate oil price output in order to make sure the oil prices don't go crazy. And the fact that the United States was trying to twist the arm of the Saudis and say, hey, we sell you all your weapons, we buy all your oil, you better go along with us against Russia. And the Saudis said, you know what, that's not in our economic interest to do that. The Russians and us, we have to negotiate oil prices. And Saudi Arabia basically wouldn't go along with the United States in their efforts to demonize Russia. On top of that, the United States is going after China very viciously, and China purchases a huge amount of Saudi oil. And China is also purchasing a lot of Iranian oil, and Iran is also being targeted. This created an opening for China to get Saudi Arabia and Iran to sit down, and now the Saudi embassy in Iran is reopening, and the Iranian embassy in Saudi Arabia is reopening. And the plan, the Netanyahu plan that was being pushed forward by Trump for an all-out war in the Middle East of the U.S.-aligned Arab states ganging up on Iran, an Arab NATO is what Trump was talking about, it flopped. This is a great thing that China has done. Yes, Saudi Arabia is awful in many ways. The Saudis are a brutal U.S.-backed regime. They're a primitive autocracy. We're not supporters of Saudi Arabia, and I risked my life trying to bring medical aid to the people of Yemen. Right? We're not opposed. We're not in favor of Saudi Arabia. But the fact that Saudi Arabia is not lining up with the United States against Iran and not continuing to line up with Israel against Iran, that's a good move. That's China seeing an opening. There was an opening because of the Ukraine situation, and Saudi Arabia was just not going to go along. And so China used that opening to help out the people of the Middle East, to help out Iran in particular. This was a great thing that China just did. And it's not a small thing. And I want to know what was agreed upon about Yemen, right? The agreement for them to reestablish diplomatic relations didn't include anything regarding Yemen. But we know that the Saudis are on one side in the Yemen war. Their army is attacking Yemen, and Iran is aligned with Ansar Allah and the Houthis and the revolutionary committees, the united front that the Houthis have around themselves. So I am curious if this means that things in Yemen may de-escalate soon, if the Yemeni people and their right to have their own country will be recognized, or if some kind of coalition government where the revolutionary forces in Yemen have representation and control certain districts is going to be set up. I'm curious what this means for Yemen. Yemen is very close to my heart because of the experiences that I had in the Middle East. It's very important to me. And so I am curious what this means for Yemen. When you have one of the poorest countries in the world, standing up to an all-out bombardment from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has the fourth largest military budget in the world. And this is one of the poorest countries in the world that has been fighting since 2015. They have been fighting for their lives against the Saudis. The Yemeni people have been resisting. And the people who want to say, oh, this is all just a conspiracy from Iran. It's all just a big conspiracy from Iran. Well, the people who want to say that, they have no idea. Because if this was a conspiracy from Iran, it would have been over in a week. It would have been over in a few days, right? It would have been over in a few days. You know, that's just the reality. It would have been over in a few days. But the Yemeni people have continued to fight and resist as they've been blockaded, as they've been starved. I mean, when I was in Djibouti, we weren't able to get to Yemen because of Saudi bombing of the port. Bombs that were intended to kill me, killed a bunch of Yemeni dock workers and some medical students. It was awful. And, you know, I got off the boat in Djibouti. And in Djibouti, I remember being at the customs office in Djibouti, and there were just crowds and crowds of Yemenis, Yemeni mothers, Yemeni children, Yemeni families that had somehow gotten across the ocean and were trying to get in Djibouti. They'd gotten away from their country because their country was in the middle of a huge war. I remember seeing that, seeing the face of war, seeing war refugees, standing in a dock in Djibouti with war refugees, with a crowd of desperately poor Yemeni people that were fleeing for their lives, mothers with babies in their arms, fleeing for their lives, trying to get out of a war zone. Right? A war imposed by U.S. imperialism and the Saudis to try and keep Yemen an impoverished country. I've seen this with my eyes. And I know that Iran is on the side of the oppressed in Yemen. It's fighting for the Ansar Allah organization. It's fighting for the southern movement that wants to bring back socialism in the Democratic People's Republic of Yemen, the South. They want the South to be autonomous and to be a socialist country again. You know, it's a big coalition. And in the northern regions that are largely Shia Muslim, it is led by the Houthis, the Ansar Allah, and they're the main military force. But it's very diverse. You have the Arab Spring Party; it's like a feminist organization. It's part of the coalition. It's a very diverse coalition of forces that are resisting the Saudis in their attempt to keep Yemen under their boot heels, to install Mansour Hadi, who was the only candidate on the ballot. He was a puppet of Saudi Arabia, to install him as the puppet president. And it's this upsurge of resistance, these people's committees that the Yemenis have created, these Soviets, basically. That's what they are. People's assemblies, you know, Bolivarian circles. I mean, whatever you want to call them, these Basij councils, these revolutionary committees that the Yemenis have built to resist Saudi domination of their country, to fight for national liberation. You know, they're resisting Saudi domination. Iran is on their side. And the Saudis are the ones killing them. So if Iran and Saudi Arabia are negotiating, maybe this means there's hope. There's hope for the conflict in Yemen to end. Maybe there's hope for the people of Yemen to actually win their national sovereignty. When I think about the war in Yemen, I always get back to this quote from Mao. I always get back to it. I'm going to read it to you, because I often will quote it wrong. I will quote it wrong. And so I want to quote it correctly. Here we go. The people of a small country can surely defeat aggression by a big country if only they dare to rise and struggle, dare to take up arms and grasp in their own hands the destiny of their country. This is a law of history. That is Mao's last official statement. And thank you, Melissa, for the super chat. The last official statement that Mao Zedong ever gave. It ends. It says, a weak nation can defeat a strong. A small nation can defeat a big. The people of a small country can surely defeat aggression by a big country, if only they dare to rise in struggle, dare to take up arms, and grasp in their own hands the destiny of their country. This is a law of history. People of the world, unite and defeat the U.S. aggressors and their running dogs. That is the last statement Mao ever gave. That's Mao's will and testament. May 23rd, 1970. He was so old after that, senile, dementia and all that, he wasn't making statements after that. He died 6 years later, but he was so old. But one of Mao's final statements, that's how it ends. And it's like he's almost talking about Yemen. I mean, he was talking about Vietnam in the statement. But he's really talking about, he could be talking about Yemen. Yemen is the Vietnam of today. I mean, these desperately poor people in one of the poorest countries in the world are up against the Saudis, who are armed by the United States, who are backed by and aligned with Israel. I mean, aligned Pakistani military. I mean, they're up against everything. And they've held out for so long. The Yemeni people should be the heroes of the whole world. You know, all these people with Ukrainian flags, they should have Houthi Yemeni flags, because the Yemenis, you want to talk about a badass group of people. You know, the Pentagon is not sending them any weapons. The Pentagon is helping the Saudis murder them. And they're still fighting after all of this. These are the greatest heroes, the Yemeni people. And, you know, that's the statement I always quote. I end my live streams with "the revolution is the main trend." That's the same statement from Mao. I'll drop it in the chat. It's the last testament, the last statement of Mao. And it's beautiful. It's very, very, very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. So there you go. I'll drop it in the chat. Very, very good. So glad to be here with all of you. All of you. So glad to be here. So glad to be here. Let me see if there's a couple other things I want to talk about. Oh, here's this. Here's this. We'll talk about January 6th. Have you seen the revelations? Tucker Carlson, I'm not going to show him on here, but you can go look at him. It's amazing. They lied about January 6th. The guy with the horns, right? The buffalo head or whatever. The police were like his tour guides. Watch the video. They're taking him around the Capitol. They try to open doors for him. The police escort people into the building. It's, I mean, utterly amazing what they've revealed. Furthermore, the evidence of police informants having made the Capitol riot what it was is massive. All kinds of evidence has come to show that the Capitol riot was very much staged by the government. I mean, that's, look at the facts. Tucker Carlson says it, and look, I have always said on these streams that as the Center for Political Innovation, we have always called for a blanket amnesty of all Black liberation fighters. Mumia Abu-Jamal should be released. Jamil Al-Amin, also known as H. Rap Brown, he should be released. You know, all the former members of the Black Liberation Army, all of them should be released. All right? And because we know about COINTELPRO, and how the U.S. government killed Fred Hampton, how the U.S. government engaged in all kinds of frame-ups and criminal activities. They sent Geronimo Pratt to prison for years when he was innocent. Based on every evil thing, all the evil the American government did during the 1970s, there needs to be a blanket amnesty for Black liberation fighters. And for, you know, all the Weathermen, the May 19th Communist Organization, you know, the Revolutionary Armed Task Force, the Black Liberation Army, that we obviously don't endorse what these people did. We are opposed to any ultra-left adventurism, terrorism. You know, we don't know that all these people are guilty, right? We don't know the details of their cases, but regardless, based on the facts that there was a huge amount of the violation of rights of Americans during that period, we call for a blanket amnesty, and that includes Leonard Peltier. All right, Leonard Peltier is a Native American activist. The evidence seems to indicate he did not kill those FBI agents in the shootout. It was friendly fire from other FBI agents who killed them. The other Native Americans who were arrested were acquitted in federal court. So they need to free Leonard Peltier, the Native American activist. They ought to free him. And I have always said this. You can go find an article. I might even still be on the internet. I don't know. They've done a lot to erase me from history. Leonard Peltier, FBI. I had a protest at my college. I remember years ago when I was a college student. The FBI had a recruitment workshop at my college, and you know, we protested the FBI recruitment workshop. And you know, I actually, yeah, there is evidence of it. Here we go. Yeah, I'm finding the old article. Here we go. Wow, this is wild. Here is the old article. I think I found it. Right, from years ago, when the FBI Yeah, here we go. Cleveland Fist protests FBI, November 5th, 2009. Me, my girlfriend, a local Native American activist, and an old boomer, we protested outside of the FBI recruitment workshop at my college, right, in support of Leonard Peltier, right? And that was something, right? And you can read the article about it. But the FBI came to my campus to recruit, and we had an information sheet. We passed out over 200 leaflets with an info sheet about COINTELPRO. I've been doing this stuff for years. My credentials as a leftist, as an anti-imperialist, are massive, right? So when the FBI came to my college campus in 2009 to recruit people, we protested them and revealed the history of COINTELPRO. Right. And I have always called for the freedom of Leonard Peltier. I've always called for the freedom of the Black Liberation Army. There needs to be a blanket amnesty for all those people. Folks, this is not something that a lot of leftists are going to want to hear, but I don't care. At this point, I don't care. We need to add the January 6th defendants to that list. We need to call for a blanket amnesty for all the January 6th protesters. Buffalo Head, whatever his name is, Shaman, let him go. Right? All of them. Oath Keepers, all of them. It was a sting operation. It is now a fact. We know as a fact that the government set up that event. All of those people need to be released. All of them. Blanket amnesty. Let the Black Panthers out. Let the Weather Underground people out. Let Leonard Peltier out. Let the January 6th people out. You have to. I'm sorry. I'm not against the right wing. I'm against the U.S. imperialist state. And these people got fucked by the U.S. imperialist state because they were aligned with a president that the pro-war lobby didn't like. They need to be released. Period. It's that simple. Now, I know if you want to play this left-right game, well, they're racist, Caleb. They're racist. They're anti-communist. Of course they are. I don't care. The U.S. deep state set a trap for these people, framed them up, and now they're in jail. They've been taken away from their families. These are fathers. These are mothers. These are, children who need to see their parents. Let them out. I don't think that we should be allowing the U.S. government. They should free all the Muslim political prisoners who've been framed up. All of them should be freed. Informants who go into mosques and they get somebody on making a joke, let them out. I am for a blanket amnesty for all political prisoners. There should be no political prisoners in America. As long as we have a government that works for Wall Street, that works for the Pentagon, that works for the big banks and corporations and military contractors, as long as we have a Wall Street monopolist regime, they should not be able to jail people for their political views, right? This is a dictatorship of capital that we live under. This is a capitalist dictatorship, and it is our job as anti-imperialists to weaken it. So we need to demand, as revolutionaries, as anti-imperialists, a blanket amnesty for all the January 6th protesters. Not that we endorse what they did. Look, we've seen what people did in videos. If they actually did that, wasn't cool. We don't encourage, just like we don't support what the Weathermen did. The Weathermen shouldn't have done what they did. Right? Left adventurous terrorism isn't good. The Black Liberation Army, we don't endorse their activities either. But the context of what the Black Liberation Army did was COINTELPRO, was the murder of Fred Hampton, was lies and murder and killing by the U.S. government. And the context of what these people did on January 6th was the same thing. FBI informants set them up. It was a sting. We have to release them. And if we're really against the state, I don't care if you're against the right wing. If you're really against the state, you should agree with me. You should agree with me, right? I don't care. J6ers want to murder communists. Yeah, you know why? Because they think communists are Joe Biden, and if I thought communists were Joe Biden, I would want to murder communists too, right? I mean, they think communists are the kind of people who get on the internet and try to destroy people's lives because they tweeted wrong about gender. Right. I mean, if I thought Joe Biden was a communist, if I might have the similar anger, but I don't think that. Right. That's the point. Right. These January 6ers are wrong, but they're against the state. And your woke left liberal kids aren't. They're not. Your woke left liberal kids are not against the deep state. These people were framed up by the deep state. and they need to be released. Now, I don't agree with what they did. The activities that they engaged in were clearly criminal, but they took place in the context of criminal activities by law enforcement, right? Entrapment, people have to understand, have the government lock them up too. So it's important to support a blanket. Yeah, that's exactly right. If they can do it to them, they can do it to us. That's what people don't get. They don't understand that, the government doesn't sit there and go, okay, we're only going to lock up right-wingers today. If they can frame these people up, if they can entrap them, if they can entrap them, they can entrap us, right? And that's why we have to call for a blanket amnesty. There should be no political prisoners in America. Free the January 6th people, Doesn't mean we endorse what they did, right? Doesn't even mean that we say they're all innocent, right? I mean, clearly, some of them were clearly doing bad stuff. Obviously not. We oppose all illegal activity. We do not endorse what they did. CPI is a completely legal organization. We're an educational organization. We're not even really an activist group. I mean, we get on bullhorns here and there, but we do not endorse what they did. We don't endorse what the Weathermen did. We don't endorse what the Black Liberation Army did. What we're saying is, in the context of widespread illegal activity by the government, people need to be released. That we have a government of big corporations and monopolies, that is violating the rights of the citizens. And in this context, when it's clear these people were entrapped and set up, we call for a blanket amnesty. And please, this is another thing. I am so tired of people on the internet calling me a punk because I don't advocate violence. Like, I'm sorry, advocating violence is illegal. Did you know that? First of all, it's illegal. Now, if you're just going to do it on Twitter and you're nobody, they don't care. But if you're me, it's a little bit more illegal. If somebody like me were to do something, advocate violence, I would probably go to jail. But even if that were not the case, even if I had total free speech to advocate violence, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it because serious revolutionaries don't, right? Revolutions only happen as an act of self-defense. Read the history of communism. Mao did not want to go up into the mountains with a gun. Mao didn't want to do that. Mao was part of the KMT government with Chiang Kai-shek. And then Chiang Kai-shek kicked him out of the government and started murdering communists, and they had to go to the countryside. And the peasants were already killing their landlords. There was in Hunan, there was already peasant uprisings. So in the context of being violently suppressed and the peasants already revolting, the communists joined the peasant uprising and led it. And then when Japan invaded China, Mao joined a coalition with Chiang Kai-shek again. And then after the Second World War, Mao wanted to form a coalition government with Chiang Kai-shek again, and Chiang Kai-shek said no, and then they had another war. Mao never wanted to have a violent revolution. Mao did everything he could to not have a violent revolution. And the same with the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks wanted to have democracy in Russia. They wanted an elected government. And so they joined a democratic uprising against the Tsar. The Tsar was toppled. And after that, they wanted to end the war. And they were leading strikes and protests demanding an end to the war. And so Levar Kornilov, who was the military leader, started marching toward St. Petersburg. And he was going to crush the protests of the Bolsheviks. And he was going to crush the provisional government. And so Lenin and the Bolsheviks defended democracy. And they defended the provisional government, the very government they were protesting against. They defended it from a fascist military coup. And at that point, their military was bigger, and their assemblies, their Soviets, were basically the government. So they said, we're basically the government now, and they became the government. They had the October Revolution. But the Bolsheviks did not want a violent revolution. The Bolsheviks wanted democracy, and they defended democracy. And there's many examples of this. Fidel Castro, he wanted a peaceful transition in Cuba, but they had a brutal dictatorship under Batista. They had a brutal dictatorship. And he said, Fidel Castro said in many of his writings, he said, we don't want violence. And in Colombia, this is important. In Colombia, the FARC, right? They were getting guns and weapons from Cuba because Colombia was a military dictatorship. But in the 90s, Colombia transitioned to having open elections. And so the Communist Party of Colombia voted to join the Colombian government. And the FARC refused to stop engaging in armed struggle. So Cuba cut off its arms to the FARC, which was the right thing to do. Because the FARC, they were engaging in violence for violence sake. The only time violent revolutions ever happen is when the people have no other choice, when their democratic rights are threatened, when their ability to get elected, to organize peacefully is suppressed. At that point, people have the right to defend themselves. And that's very, very different. That's very, very different. This idea that, we're going to go out, have act crazy and some of the stuff people are saying, that is not Marxism, right? That's called adventurism. That's called punchism. That's called Blanquism. And it is a deviation of our movement. Read William Z. Foster, the leader, the greatest American communist. The greatest communist in American history, William Z. Foster. Read what he advocated. He advocated the formation of an anti-monopoly coalition, an anti-imperialist government. This was the greatest communist. This is a guy that Mao Zedong wrote personal telegrams to, congratulating him on defeating Earl Browder. He didn't advocate violence. This is the guy who led the steel strike of 1919. He led the unemployment councils. Who wrote Toward Soviet America. But even he said, we don't want violence. We want a peaceful transition, but the capitalists may not allow it. And Gus Hall said the same thing, and that serious revolutionaries do not advocate violence. And this is a really, really important point. It's a really, 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 really important point. Serious revolutionaries do not advocate violence. They don't advocate illegal activity either. They advocate a peaceful transition to socialism. But they recognize that if the capitalists were to move to abolish democracy and to set up a fascist state, it would be the responsibility of communists to defend democracy from fascism. And that's what they did in China, and that's what they did in Russia, and that's what they did in Cuba, and that's what they've done elsewhere, right? We want to take power peacefully. We want to participate in elections. And the only time that we're forced to take power in other ways is when the road of peaceful transition is blocked. And this is the responsible way to talk about this issue, right? And that anyone who comes along and doesn't talk this way is full of shit. Okay, I'm just telling you that. If someone comes along and they're like, nuh-uh, you can't vote in, so maybe you can't, but you have to try, right? And there's certain tricks that people that have this silly ultra-leftist line like to say. They always say, you really think socialism could come about because of an election? Of course not. Socialism, the transition from one economic system to another, where one group of people, one group of people controls the means of production and another group of people then controls them. A complete transfer of control over the economy could come about as a result of one election? Of course not. We don't think that. That's a trick, right? Socialism requires an upsurge of democratic participation. It requires huge mobilizations of the population. It requires big bodies, community assemblies and labor unions and parties. And it requires a huge upsurge of involvement among the population. No, the idea that we're going to have socialism just because we have an election one day and everyone just happened to check that box, that's what happened. Of course not. So when people say, oh, well, you think socialism is going to come through elections? No. I think elections are one part of the struggle, but it has to be a society-wide struggle. There have to be strikes. There have to be community assemblies. There have to be big protests and mobilizations. There has to be ideological education, teaching people Marxism and revolutionary ideology. There has to be a change in the economy. It's so much bigger than that. But do we want a peaceful transition to socialism? Yes. Do we want a transition to socialism through the democratic process? Yes. Would we prefer to avoid civil war and violence? Yes. And those kind of things, they do happen. And around the world, many communist revolutions have been very, very violent. That has happened. It has absolutely happened. But it has only happened because the road of peaceful transition was blocked. And that's an important warning to our leaders. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and John F. Kennedy both said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. Let me repeat that. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And if they won't allow people to peacefully organize, peacefully elect socialist candidates, peacefully enact an economic program to change society, and if they violently suppress people's ability to organize, then they're the ones that would be paving the way for some kind of violent revolution. We don't want that. We don't want that. We want a peaceful transition to socialism. And the people that call me a punk and a sellout and a revisionist for saying that, the reason you're saying that is because it doesn't matter. You have no mass base. You don't have an organization. You don't have international connections. And you just spouting off on the internet, I want violence, just doing that doesn't mean anything, right? You know, you can get on the internet and say, I'm going to go steal $1 million. But if you're not actually going to steal $1 million, no one cares, right? It doesn't matter. You can just, that's like farting in the wind, right? And so you can get on the internet and talk about how ultra revolutionary you are because you advocate some illegal violent thing. It doesn't matter because there's no you're never going to do it, number one. And number two, it doesn't matter that you advocate that because no one's listening to you. And people on the internet like that, it's juvenile and it's stupid. And I did talk that way at one point in my life. I'll be honest. At one point when I was in the Workers' World Party, we were an ultra-left organization. The Workers' World Party is an ultra-left group. It's a tiny sect. It's a remnant of the Cold War. And they did talk this way sometimes. And they were wrong. And they would always get upset. I would read William Z. Foster and I would talk about a peaceful transition to socialism and they would get all upset. And I would say, so you're for violence? They're like, well, we don't say that. It's like, come on, grow up. They're not, it's juvenile. It is juvenility, right? It is juvenility. Whenever anyone starts talking about how they want violent revolution, they're being juvenile. Right. And if you really want to read probably the best piece of writing on this topic that I have ever read, I will link it here in the chat. It's by William Z. Foster. It is called In Defense of the Communist Party and Its Indicted Leaders. It is a great pamphlet that William Z. Foster wrote. It was when the American government put the Communist Party of the United States, their leadership, on trial and accused them of preaching the violent overthrow of the government. And William Z. Foster wrote this beautiful pamphlet explaining how they were not guilty of that crime and laying out a thoroughly Marxist perspective on this question. You can go read it. Communists do not advocate a violent revolution. They don't, and they never have. There's not a single place that genuine communist forces have actively tried to have a violent revolution when a peaceful transition was possible. They've always done the opposite. They've participated in elections. They've held rallies and protests and demonstrations. And the places that have had violent revolutions, it's only happened because that's been made impossible. And if you look at Venezuela, for example, Hugo Chavez was able to take power and transition to socialism peacefully. Now, they tried to overthrow him. They had a violent coup to try and remove him. But then he suppressed that coup and they had to bring in a new constitution and they created a new military that got trained in Cuba. So the nature of the state had to change. They weren't able to build it with a capitalist state. And there was violent reaction to them. But they were able to take power initially peacefully in Venezuela. In Nicaragua in 2006, the Sandinistas were able to get back into power peacefully. Now they had to change a lot of things when they got in. So this is important stuff. This is really, really, really important stuff to talk about, right? This is really, really important because if we're going to be serious about this, we're not going to be kids fooling around on the internet. We have to talk about this in a responsible way. The way Jason Unruhe talks on his channel, where he's waving his airsoft gun around and he's got his mohawk, that's not responsible. That's not a serious political organization. That's not how someone like that is never going to win an election. Somebody like that is never going to lead an organization of millions of people. That's a goofball. We don't want to be goofballs. We want to be serious. We wear suits and ties. We want to get some shit done. We want to actually build a think tank and educate people about Marxism. That's what we want to do. But there you go. And that actually is a good transition to the next thing I want to talk about. The next thing I wanted to talk about. Folks, this is a book. I read this book a really long time ago. This is called Being Read by Howard Fast. And this is the guy who wrote the novel Spartacus. He wrote the novel Freedom Road. He was a famous American novelist who joined the Communist Party. And this is it's an interesting book. He joined the Communist Party during World War II when they were being very moderate because they were trying to support the war effort against the Nazis. And then as World War II ended, the Communist Party got much more radical because the Cold War was starting. And he stayed in the Communist Party all through McCarthyism, when they were being outlawed, when members were being put in prison. He left over the Khrushchev revelations, but this is his account. This is his account. This is his account of communism and being in the Communist Party during the 1950s, McCarthyism. It's very good. And I want to read you a passage from this book. It's a short passage. It's going to be hard for me to read it without crying. And the reason it's going to be hard for me to read it without crying is because I met people who were there during this time. Right? I have told you all I made a little documentary about a woman named Frances Dostal. Frances Dostal, she was part of the anti-Korean War movement. We all know about the protests against the Vietnam War. But in the middle of McCarthyism, in like 1948, 49, 1950, 1951, 1952, there was a small communist-led protest movement against the Korean War. And Frances Dostal, she was in nursing school at the time, and she actually described protesting against the Korean War when the Communist Party was completely illegal, when it was secretive, and how they protested against it. And she was like in her early 20s during those years. And she described protesting against the Korean War. Well, in this book by Howard Fast, he also describes protesting against the Korean War. And I'm just going to read you he describes in a few paragraphs what it was like for our comrades back in 1950, how it was they had to protest when the Korean War was happening, when, millions of people were being killed on the Korean Peninsula, when China and the Red Army were fighting against the U.S. imperialists on the Korean Peninsula aligned with Kim Il-sung. In America, it was completely illegal to be the communist. Communists were in prison. The FBI was crushing the Communist Party. And a few people had the courage in New York City to protest against the Korean War. And this is what happened. I'm going to read it to you. And it was also at a time that a lot of communists and leftists were being arrested, McCarthyism. This is what he wrote. He said, "We wanted to do something for the people arrested and imprisoned, either because they would not name names or because they were involved with the Communist Party leadership. I wrote an impassioned speech against the police state, against war, and then I recorded it in a friendly studio. We rented a room, Irv and I and Julie Trupin, at the old Astor Hotel on the 12th floor, if I remember correctly. And we brought into the room a record player and a loudspeaker with good amplification. We had a timer to start the record. After we set up the mechanism, we opened up the window. We set the loudspeaker on a chair facing the open window and Broadway. And we closed the door behind us, and then we broke the key in the lock. And then we went down the street and waited on the east side of Broadway. And it was quite extraordinary. Everyone in the area heard a voice denouncing the drive to war. The record was 18 minutes long, and the message finished and started all over again, and finished and began to play a third time. Almost finished its third playing before they finally got into the room and stopped it. And from a distance, it may seem like a childish caper. But remember that except for a handful of left-wing periodicals, with a combined circulation of 200,000, the vast apparatus of the media was closed to our ideas, closed to any arguments for peace. We felt that it wasn't enough to face imprisonment or blacklisting or slander. We had to be heard. And if we were not heard, there would be no voice for what we thought was best for America. Can you believe this? Because there was no other way to get the message out. Back in 1950, he just described they rented a hotel room. They got speakers and a record player, and they set a timer, and they broke the lock, and so that it would be hard to open the door. And they ran down the street, and they waited for the timer, and then an anti-war, anti-imperialist, anti-police state speech blasted through Times Square. That's what our comrades had to do to get the message out there. That's how hard it was. There was no TV. There was no Facebook. There was no YouTube back then. I mean, there was TV back then, but there were 3 channels. Most people had 3 channels, and those channels were not going to allow communists or anti-imperialists on there. And they were so dedicated. They were so dedicated that that's what they had to do. It was so important to get an anti-imperialist message that they rented a hotel room, they got a record player, and they blasted it out there. And if Howard Fast and our comrades can do this, if that's what our comrades can do, then you can come to our conference. You can make it to Washington, D.C., and we can have an amazing conference March 25th and 26th. You can make it. You can be there. If they can do that just to get the message out there, we don't have to do that now. We're allowed to have open conferences that aren't broken apart by the FBI. We're allowed to be here on YouTube streaming. So there's no excuse, right? If our comrades can do that at a time when the party leadership is all in jail and they're being rounded up and there's a Korean War going on, then us holding a conference, just coming to Washington, D.C. for a conference, easy to do. So sign up. Sign up. Okay. So just sign up, right? I mean, we need you to sign up. But actually, a couple of the people that are going to be coming to our conference and speaking have made some really great videos. And so we're going to put those videos on there. Why not, right? This is Peter Coffin. Peter Coffin, longtime friend of mine, just a great guy all around. Met him at the CPI Austin conference. He gave an amazing talk there. He's coming. He's actually making like a documentary about the conference, which is so awesome. Here we go. This is Peter Coffin.
It's Peter Coffin, author of books, most recently Woke Ouroboros, documentarian with my series of very important documentaries, most recently Less Sucks. And I am really excited. We're going to be doing an event called the Summit Against Hypocrisy, which is basically a counter forum to the Summit for Democracy that the Biden administration is ironically putting on. You know, the primary imperialist force in the world gathering together with the leaders of a few other countries that support it, claiming to promote democracy. I'm going to speak and host a panel there. Garland Nixon's going to be there. Nick Braun is going to be there. Jyoti Barr is going to be there. Plenty of others. I'll include a link in the description to the Eventbrite. That's going to include all the relevant information, and it's going to be consistently updated until the day of the actual event. It's in Washington, D.C., and I want everybody who can be there to be there. That's the Center for Political Innovation's Summit Against Hypocrisy on March 25th and 26th. See you there.
That's Peter Coffin. That's Peter Coffin. He is going to be there. He'll be chairing one of the panels. He's going to be awesome. And then we have another friend of mine. This guy, he has a great YouTube channel. One of these days, we're just going to have him on this channel. But I guess today we're just going to show his video. This is Bismuth. Bismuth Hurts. And he's also going to be there. So there we go.
Everybody, this is Bismuth Hurts, and today I am recording this video to let you know that I will be attending the Summit Against Hypocrisy. That is right, I will be attending this anti-imperialist rally hosted by CPI, and you can see the details for this rally online here, the Summit Against Hypocrisy. And I just wanted to talk about this rally a bit. So, this is going to be on Saturday, March 25th through March 26th. If you sign up, you'll learn where it is. And this is going to be, a whole 2-day event in Washington, D.C. to respond to Joe Biden's Summit for Democracy. Well, this is our summit against hypocrisy, right? The point is to hopefully, have a very strong and distinct counter to Joe Biden's message. We're going to have Garland Nixon. I'm a big fan of Garland Nixon. He's on Radio Sputnik. We have Nick Brana. That is the People's Party organizer, Nick Brana, big name. Jyoti Barr, she is a very important Marxist-Leninist theory. I believe she's a theoretician. I believe she's British, and she's had a lot of conversations with Caleb Maupin, great conversations. We're also going to have Peter Coffin, who is someone who lives outside of the Matrix and makes very, very interesting videos. Nobody quite like Peter Coffin. So, this rally, it's going to have music, performance, and art. You will laugh, you will cry. I can guarantee, if you show up to this rally, it will be an experience. It certainly will be. If you've never attended a CPI rally before, you may have your idea about what it's like. Well, okay, I am going to be there, and I plan on giving a speech about China. So, it's pretty easy to point out U.S. hypocrisy on China, and I'm going to do it gratuitously and maybe even teach the audience a thing or two that they didn't know. I look forward to seeing the speeches at this rally. We're going to have a lot of people in CPI. Maybe they're not as experienced giving speeches, maybe this will be one of their first speeches, but, we're also going to have a lot of, really good speeches, I anticipate, really interesting speeches. So, please attend this rally if you can, sign up if you can. I'm going to fly out all the way to DC, and so if you go to this rally, you'll definitely will meet me at this rally, and I just want everybody to know about it. Consider donating to it. If you like what I'm doing and saying, then you probably should just donate to CPI. Don't donate to me necessarily. And when you donate to CPI, you are in a way donating to me. You're donating to everybody that CPI is supporting and helping to give a voice. And I am one of those people, right? You know, as much effort and time as I put into CPI, I get it back. I get it back, and it leads me to good opportunities like being able to speak at this rally. So if you join CPI, you can have a mutually supportive relationship in an organization that is actually going to care about you and is actually going to let you think how you want to while focusing on the more fundamental points of agreement. And I think that's a wonderful thing, and that's why I'm a member of CPI. Now, I also want to shortly bring up the PSL Answer Coalition rally. Now, previously I said that I'm not invited to this rally. Well, in truth, I am not invited to this rally. You know what I'm saying? They didn't say I can't go. I am just simply, not going to attend because I don't feel like going out to where is this rally? It is at Washington, D.C. at the White House, right? I don't feel like going out to Washington, D.C. on March 18th and then going out again for CPI or staying there the whole time. You know, I don't feel like going, right? But, you know, I could go if I wanted to. And, you know, I do believe in a fundamental unity. I do believe in an ideal world that Answer and PSL would be able to at least bond with us and agree with us on this very fundamental thing, you know, and you know, hopefully we would be able to be in a mutually supportive relationship with PSL as well. You know, previously I was very negative about them because I've personally had a negative experience with PSL, but, you know, the mature and objective perspective will see that it is necessary to create ties and connections wherever we can. CPI is actually sponsoring that PSL rally. Doesn't mean we agree with everything PSL does, but we're hoping that, you know, maybe they'll see it as a good faith gesture and we can, you know, do the mature thing and unite on fundamental agreements. You know, so I just wanted to point out, you know, mostly that CPI rally, the Summit Against Hypocrisy. You know, I am going, so go, you know, donate, you know, support us. We're going to grow. If you give money to CPI, it's not going to be eaten, you know, and disappear. It's actually going to yield tangible results. It means that, you know, CPI might help somebody pay for their plane ticket to get to the rally. It means CPI might be able to afford to keep more people at a hotel in Washington, D.C. It means that CPI might have more or higher quality food or amenities for the people that are doing this, you know, better microphones, better cameras, you know, all these things. It's very tangible. CPI is a very purpose-driven and organized group of people. We are trying to get things done. We are trying to create rallies, and it's actually really amazing that we've been able to do everything that we've done so far, and that we're getting started up so quickly and creating a presence so quickly. And if you remember our recent rallies, you know, the footage from the intro of those rallies has become somewhat of an icon, maybe a controversial one, but, you know, we know how to get attention. You know, we know how to cause a fuss, cause a stir. You know, our audiences will laugh and cry at our rallies. You know, we know how to create an engaging and interesting rally that's going to get attention. That's our goal. So please try to help us out with that, and hopefully I will see you there. So bye-bye, guys.
Yeah, that was a great video from Bismuth Hertz. That was tremendous. That was tremendous. So yeah, if you can't make it, I see there's a couple people in the chat. Donate. Help us do it. Just give us a donation to help us put on the event. That's really helpful. And if you are going and you still want to donate, that's appreciated as well. But this is going to be a really important conference. I mean, the amount of high-level people there, Scott Ritter, Nick Brana, you know, at this point, we're going to have Jyoti Brar, you know, from the CP GBML, important British communist who's flying in. We're going to have Daniel Villa. We're going to have Don DeBar. It's turning into quite a shindig, as they say. So, who knows how often we'll be able to have conferences like this, and like I said, we're lucky. We're very, very lucky that we don't live in full fascism yet. We already have to keep the location secret from Antifa because people love to smear us and threaten violence against us. We already have to have crazy security, and we will be having heavy security at these kind of conferences, right? We're going to make sure our speakers are protected and that no one's hurt. But it's great that we're able to have this conference. I want to encourage everyone to attend. And if you can't attend, send us a donation. A donation would always help. So there you go. And I've got a good number of super chats to read in the second half of the show. So why don't we now do our roll call? I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who's with us? Who's with us tonight? I will start calling people out as I see them. Names and locations. We got Aziz in Sydney, Australia. Ryan in Oakland. Welcome. Robert in Hawaii. At the gym in Bendigo, Australia. Brad from Cleveland. I need to get back to the gym myself. Robert from Hawaii. QC from LA County. Marcos Valencia from Venezuela. Lori Spencer out in Oklahoma. Tyler in Missouri. Donnie Wallace in Four Oaks, North Carolina. Blind Hate, right? We got Colin in Greensboro. Noah from Cruz, Fresno, California. Savarero from Feliani, Mexico. Yada Yisrael from Chicago. Timoshenko in St. Louis. Princeton, New Jersey, SG. Joe in South Jersey. We got Patch in Arizona. Chris in Doral, Florida. Mark in Mission, Texas. Maupin Time in Scotland. Perth, Washington. We got Bob Troy in New York. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati is with us. St. David's, Bermuda. John Whitty in Houston. We got Jonathan in Los Angeles. Funky Lollipop. I met you in DC. Funky Lollipop. You're awesome. Donnie Wallace from Newton Grove, North Carolina. Randall Wilson from Lexington, Kentucky is with us. Welcome. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Christina in Portland is with us. That's awesome. That is awesome. I just talked. I don't know if people saw this. Last night, I jumped on the stream of Terry Strange, an old friend of mine from Portland. I've been following her stuff on YouTube for years. She was having an open stream. I just jumped on. I'm going to cut it and clip it. I'm going to post it tomorrow. It was a great chat we had. Terry Strange is out in Portland. A lot of great people. Elizabeth, our president, she's in Portland. Christina is in Portland. We had a lot of great people in Portland. That's the next stop, by the way. Our next event, whenever we're ready to do another event, it'll be in Portland. All right, Raleigh, North Carolina. Mariah is with us. Perth, West Australia. Anthony in Fort Worth, Texas. Mike in North Carolina. Jenny Lynn saw the stream with Terry. Yeah, it was pretty cool. Terry's pretty cool. I've liked Terry for a long time. She's a nice person, nice human being. Juan in Quito, Ecuador. Philip in Dublin, Ireland. Welcome, Philip. Welcome. Anybody else? Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Alex from Brazil. The Truth from Canada. Welcome, all of you. Welcome. Tadg in Dublin, Ireland. That's cool. We got a big Irish fan base here. Very, very good. Very good. All right. Alrighty. Donnie Wallace, welcome. Herb Bryant, Florida. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. One quick thing I want to say before the Q&A. I did an amazing interview with Kim Iverson. And Kim Iverson doesn't agree with me on everything, but she had me on her show to talk about China, even though she's anti-communist, even though she has perspectives about China and COVID that I don't agree with. She had me on her show for 23 minutes. I talked about that in the opening of the show for a really long time, Jay, for a really long time. And I talked about the implications for Yemen and all of that. I'll put it on the list, but I talked about that for a really long time. But it was a great conversation. It was really, really great. And it also did very, very well. I mean, it exploded on social media. I mean, it's got like, it's got like almost 30,000 views, and the fact that she had me on her show to talk the way I did, even though her perspective is different and she gave her perspective, the fact that she gave me a platform to do that is amazing. And she now has posted just today. She posted it on her YouTube channel. Originally, it was just on Rumble, but now it's on her YouTube channel. She has posted it. So I really appreciate people praising me in the comments, but all the people dumping all over her in the comments, can you keep this in perspective? Like, because again, it's kind of like with Tulsi Gabbard, right? Did Kim Iverson say some things? Exactly, Mariah. Did she say some things in the interview that I disagree with, but that are her perspective about China that are not mine? Absolutely. But she let me on her show to give that perspective. That's amazing. She has a huge audience, and she let her audience be exposed to my anti-imperialist views. Furthermore, Kim Iverson brought Chairman O'Malley of the Uhuru movement, brought him on the show. That's amazing as well. So I look at the comments, and I read the comments on that video that I posted. And all the comments are like, Kim this and Kim that, and she's not a real Asian, and she's this. Guys, let's have some perspective here. Somebody with a huge platform, let me get on there and present the anti-imperialist view of China. That's huge. That's huge. That's a really good thing. So, it's kind of like with Tulsi Gabbard. When somebody who's not totally where we're at gives us an opening, we should run with it. And I saw a lot of the angry comments in there, and a lot of very personal negative things said to Kim. And I'm just like, guys, this is somebody who doesn't have our perspective, is not a communist by any means, not a Marxist-Leninist, very much a Republican. I think she's a conservative, but she's anti-war, and she's in favor of civil liberties. And so she is suspicious of the idea that China is a threat. And so she gave me an opportunity to give the other side of the story. That's a great thing. We should be applauding her for doing such a thing, right? And I would really urge people to, I appreciate you praising me in the comments. That's really great. But the next time I go on a show, don't rip to shreds the person who just gave me a platform, even if they don't agree with me. Now, she'd been mean to me in the interview. Okay, fine. That I might understand. If she'd said, well, you're wrong, you lying communist. She didn't do that. She gave her perspective. She let me give mine. That was huge. And it was really good for China. And it was really good for the Center for Political Innovation. If you go to the website, or you go to her YouTube channel, she linked the Center for Political Innovation website in the description of the video. And I didn't even give it to her. She didn't ask me. She said, she did enough research on me that she found the CPI website. If you go to Kim Iverson's channel, latest video is about China. In the description, it says to learn more about Caleb's views, and it has a website to cpiusa.org. It has a link. That's awesome. That's tremendous. That's amazing. That's great. That's tremendous. That's a really, really, really good thing. That's a great thing. That's a really, really good thing. So, when people, who are of a variety of different views open their door to us, appreciate it. Don't burn a bridge. Don't burn a bridge, right? I think it's really great. I hope Kim has me on again another time. She may not. We'll see. But it was really great what Kim did. So be happy about it. Be happy that we had a great breakthrough and that Kim was open-minded enough to hear my perspective. And she admitted, listen to the part of the interview where she's talking about Vietnam, how her family's from Vietnam, but she actually admits that economically their life got much better because of communism. That at first, when the communists came to power, her family wanted to flee, but then later in the interview, she says, but their life has gotten so much better because of the communists in Vietnam, they don't want to flee. Now, she has issues with the civil liberties, and that's a fair concern, but she admitted that her family's life and economic circumstances have vastly improved in Vietnam because of communism. For somebody of her perspective, from a right-wing, anti-communist Vietnamese exile family, for her to say that, that's huge. Miami Cubans will never say anything good about communism. People who fled from Vietnam or Laos, they will often, it is like pulling teeth for them to say anything good about communism. But for her to actually say what she said in the interview, which was she didn't agree with communism and she talked about civil liberties, but then to go as far as she did to actually admit that her family's life is better off, they don't want to move to the United States, and that the communists have improved life in Vietnam, that's huge. That's huge. So be happy, right? We have to be happy. We can't, that's part of the cancel culture attitude. Kim Iverson is also a friend of ours. Tara Reid and Johnny Fiorella's brother, Convo Couch, says Ellie Morano, and you're exactly right. Tara Reid is awesome, and I'm really happy that conversation happened. I'm really, really happy. Kim is not a conservative, but a lockdown left, calls her that because she doesn't toe the liberal narrative. Yeah, I'll write that down. Right. So I want people to, it's the same kind of thing with Tulsi Gabbard. It's like somebody in the establishment comes along and opens a door for us. She's had Lori on before. That's awesome. Lori's been on that show before. That is awesome. That's way better. She's, it's way better. So I would urge people to put things in perspective. There are some people, and I mean, I'll just say it. There are some people that are left book losers, right? That are left book losers. All they ever want to be is somebody complaining on the internet, right? And I think you all know who I'm talking about. I mean, or maybe there's just so many of them you don't. There's certain people, they have no problem completely wrecking an organization, completely burning bridges with people. All they want to do is just be somebody complaining on the internet. They want to be the internet Zoomer version of Old Man Yells at Cloud. You ever see that cartoon, Old Man Yells at Cloud? That's, there's a lot of people who used to be like parts of our community, and that's what they have turned into. They have turned into Old Man Yells at Cloud, right? That's basically what Dust James' channel is. It's Old Man Yells at Cloud. That's all he's ever going to be. He's burned bridges with everyone he's ever worked with. He's Old Man Yells at Cloud, and he's younger than I am. Right. And there's certain other people I could name. I'm not even going to name them because I don't want to give them any play. That's all they are. They're just, and if that's all you ever want to be, and you never really want to accomplish anything in life, that's all you want to be is Old Man Yells at Cloud. Let me pull up the Simpsons cartoon. There's a Simpsons cartoon, Old Man Yells at Cloud. Like, if that's all you ever want to be, you want to be a left book loser. You want to be the millennial version of Old Man Yells at Cloud. I mean, by all means, yes. If Kim doesn't agree with you on every issue, you can burn a bridge with her and call her. If Tulsi Gabbard is part of the U.S. military and supports Israel, you can cuss her out upwards, backwards, and forward. But it's like in the real world, if you want to actually accomplish something, you have to have relationships, right? This is what most internet communists have been reduced to. You don't want to be that. You don't want to be that, right? And that's what a lot of these people are. They just sit there and they just, oh, this person disagreed with me. This person said something wrong. This person disappointed me. This person made a bad decision. I mean, it's just, and that's all they are. You don't want to be that. Do you want to be that? I don't want you to be that. So please, if Kim Iverson does something good, praise her for it. I am, and I said this in my speech. I actually said this in my speech on February 19th, and I am not ashamed of this. I wanted to like AOC. Did you know this? I tried to like AOC. Now, it was impossible. She just made it abundantly clear she was not anti-imperialist. She was in the way she went after Jimmy Dore, and I can't stand AOC. I have no desire to defend her. But when she first came into office, when she was first running, I met her before she was even called AOC, before she even won the nomination. When she was just this this, late 20s Democrat running for Congress. I met AOC. We had a conversation. At a Bernie Sanders meetup. And, I got some of her literature. I brought it home to my wife. I said, this woman, she might be in Congress pretty soon. And my wife's like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm like, I think she's got a chance. I wanted to like AOC. Now AOC sucks. And you can't like AOC, but I tried. And that should be our attitude. If somebody comes along who seems like they might be good, if a Tulsi Gabbard or a Kim Iverson, or she's not in Congress, but if somebody comes along who looks like they might do something good, don't throw them completely under the bus. And that applies to the right wing too, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene. I kind of like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I hate to admit that. It's hard to admit that, but she gave like a workers' world speech on the floor of Congress about money for jobs and not for war. There's not food for our mothers, and they've got money for weapons to blow up in Ukraine. That's like, money for jobs, not for war. That's practically every workers' world party, Ramsey Clark International Action Center protest I ever went to. Money for jobs and not for war. Money for schools and not for war. And she was on the floor of Congress saying, money for baby formula, not for war. Good. Great. I like it. Don't like some of the other things she says about the border and other things, but it's like, get it. If something good happens, you gotta get the most out of it. Right. And when people come along and they don't want, it's just like, Tulsi Gabbard just gives this amazing speech on Tucker Carlson about how they blew up the Nordstream 2 and how our leaders are liars. And you're like, yeah, but she supports Israel, so fuck her. It's like, okay, she's bad on Israel, but she's really good. And she was good on Syria before that. And it's like, there's this childish attitude that people have where it's like, they won't allow anything good to happen. And if you have that attitude, if you start acting like old man yells at cloud, you're letting the enemy win. Because that's exactly what Netflix wants. That's exactly what all this pessimism is about. They want you to not believe you can actually do anything. It's a mindset. It's a cynical, hopeless, pessimistic mindset that they're selling. And so even though you might call yourself a communist, and even though you might, if you buy into that mindset where every good thing that happens just has to be, and it's phony, if that's your attitude about the world, you're still helping the system, because that is the attitude the system is promoting. Yes, back in the 1960s, back in the 1950s, their attitude was be optimistic, love America. That is not their attitude. Now they are all about degrowth and pessimism and impoverishment. That's what they're all about. That's what they're all about now, right? That's what they're all about now. So if we just have the attitude that, no, everyone's a fraud, everyone's a phony, every political group is a cult, everything's a grift. I mean, if you have that attitude, that's all you're ever going to be. And that's what they want you to be. That's what they want you to be. They want you to be old man yells at cloud. You have it in you, I believe, that you have it in you to be more. You have it in you to be more than old man yells at cloud. I mean, you do. And thanks, Lori. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't endorse candidates here. And, we're trying to get nonprofit status for CPI and such, but I appreciate it. It is noted. But you want to be more than this. You really want to be more than this. Right? You don't want to be old man yells at cloud. So I'm urging you to be happy about things that happen. When there's an opening in the system, try to utilize it. If we're going to do anything, we have to build something. We have to build something. And that means real alliances. So there you go. There you go. All right, folks. Now I'm going to start answering Super Chat questions. First Super Chat question. Thoughts on Mexico applying to join the BRICS? I am so pro BRICS. You have no idea how pro BRICS I am. I think the BRICS is awesome. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, a new currency, trade deals, the BRICS Bank. I am all about it. I'm all about it. I'm down. So the idea that Mexico might join it, I mean, it's going to be, what is it? BRICSM, right? But AMLO is a good guy. He's the leader of a popular front, kind of an anti-imperialist coalition government. Mexico is thoroughly under the grip of the imperialists, but for the first time in in years. We have a leadership in Mexico that's not completely a puppet of the United States, and so I think that's a good step in the right direction. I'm positive on AMLO, even though he hasn't done much. And he's up against, look, I was in Mexico, and the Mexican government tried to prevent CPI from sending our delegation to Nicaragua. Seriously, like the Mexican government, the Mexican deep state, the Mexican police, the Mexican intelligence agencies, they are completely run by the cartels and by the American deep state. And so the fact that AMLO is in there doing what he's doing, he's pro-Venezuela, he's pro-Cuba, he's friendly to China, and he's building airports, and he's, trying to get the drug cartel stuff under control. I'm positive on AMLO. He hasn't done much because he's up against a lot, but joining BRICS, that'd be awesome. Awesome. There we go. I see David Fox. I see David Fox. I just wrote down David Fox. David, do you remember what you super chatted? I forgot to write down what you said. I just wrote David Fox. I forgot to write down what it was you said. If you remember what you said, I will just remind me. I will say it. For some reason, I wrote your super chat down wrong. I just wrote David Fox. So if David Fox, if you're listening, let me know what you said and I will answer it. I guess I didn't write it down properly. Now, someone said transition to socialism with 4 steps, not with meaningless violence. Exactly. Put forward a transitional program of what you would do to transition the United States toward a socialist society. That's what we did at cpiusa.org. We have 4 points that we're for. Public ownership of natural resources, public control of banking, a mass mobilization to rebuild the country, an economic bill of rights. Those 4 things would require pushing back so much capitalist power. Those 4 things would be a transition towards socialism. And those are 4 things I think most Americans could agree with. Do you think people should be guaranteed jobs, healthcare, and education? Do you think that maybe the country should be getting rich from our oil instead of big bankers? Don't you think that money should be lended strategically in the interest of the country? Don't you think we ought to have a high-tech, reboot of the country, and new railroads and new schools and new hospitals and new power plants? I mean, who could be against those 4 things? But in order to enact them, you'd have to push back so much capitalist power that it's a transitional program, right? Those are 4 things that would be a transition towards socialism. So there you go. All righty. Someone said, remember Martin Niemöller? First, they came for the communists. Yeah, that's the pastor who was arrested in Nazi Germany. He said, first they came for the communists. I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists. I didn't speak up because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. Then they came, and that was, and again, it's not about agreeing with the January 6th people. It's not even about agreeing with what they did. The point is they were framed up by the deep state, and that same deep state could frame us up in the same way. And so in order to weaken the power of the U.S. imperialists and their state, and to not allow them to engage in heavy-handed repression like they did and trap people like they did on January 6th, we should support them. It's not about agreement. It's about, are you with the U.S. imperialist state, or are you with the people that they entrap and suppress? And we, at this point, I say blanket amnesty for the January 6th people. Blanket amnesty. That's what I'm for. All right. Next question. What book should I read about Gaddafi? Well, I've got it right here. You should read the Green Book, because I wrote the introduction to the Green Book. I wrote a very long introduction, which I go over Gaddafi's life. And I talk about all kinds of aspects of his life and his leadership. It starts on page 13, and my introduction ends on page 31. You should read the Green Book, the CPI. This is the first book we published, was the Green Book by Gaddafi. I wrote a very long introduction talking about Gaddafi, who he was from childhood, the economics of his leadership of Libya, etc. And then you can actually read his writing in the Green Book, and you can learn all about his economic theories. You can learn all about that stuff. Why do you think 2 tourists were murdered in Mexico? Do you think the U.S. will use this as an excuse to intervene? Also, the timing is suspect. Well, that's interesting. Writing it down, Chris. Writing it down. All righty. And then Lori asks about thoughts on RFK Jr.'s presidential campaign. I've met that guy before, and he's been very outspoken about vaccines. He's been very outspoken about a lot of different issues. And The idea that the fact that he's running for president certainly makes me smile. I'll tell you that much. It certainly makes me smile to see that he's running. We need dissidents. I mean, his book on Dr. Fauci, I read that. I was like, whoa. So yeah, the fact that he's talking about a presidential campaign, that can't be a bad thing in my book. Monday's impending bank crisis. Well, the Silicon Valley Bank crashed, right? We saw that. And there's talk that this could lead to more banks crashing. This is all an economic crisis rooted in, what I talk about, which is overproduction, which is the tendency of the rate of profits to fall. Kim Iverson was speaking up on Twitter about how it's going to be startup companies and low-level tech folks are going to lose out. The big tech monopolies, Twitter, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, they're going to be fine, right? It's going to be a lot of low-level tech companies that are going to suffer, right? And this is the whole pandemic. This is how it's been, right? All the mom and pop stores had to close and Walmart stayed open. Amazon stayed open. The big monopolies are trying to just demolish any opposition, right? So, yeah, the fact that Silicon Valley Bank closed down, that was bad for a lot of low-level tech companies. They're really going to suffer. They're really going to suffer. That's not good. We don't want that. We don't want them to suffer. So, the lower levels of capital are being crushed. That's very, very clear. And, and capital is centralizing. This is what's wrong with the theory of the yeoman. Right. The theory of the yeoman, that was Thomas Jefferson's whole thing. Oh, we can have a country of small farmers, right? Of just independent farmers who own their own land. Well, eventually there's going to be a drought. And some of those farms are going to go under. And then the farms that don't go under are going to sweep up those farms. And pretty soon, instead of having a bunch of little small farmers, you're going to have one big farm that employs a bunch of farm laborers. That's what Karl Marx called the general law of capitalist accumulation. Capital tends to centralize, right? And that's why the government has all these efforts to break apart monopolies. Because when you have monopolies, you get what's called monopolistic stagnation. Monopolistic stagnation. And, so the government is constantly having to break up monopolies because under capitalism, you get what are called natural monopolies, where eventually it all ends up in one guy's hands and then he can do whatever he wants. The government has to step in. And this idea that libertarians have this in their head that capitalism, everything just works out. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. In fact, left to its own devices, the market creates what's called a natural monopoly. That's why the state is constantly stepping in to break apart monopolies, right? There's many things. There's many, many examples. I mean, when I worked in the insurance industry, I remember learning about some of the crazy things. If the government were not heavily involved in regulating insurance, it would fall apart, right? Capitalism left to its own devices leads to an economic crisis. The government goes out of its way, and it's not even to do it for the people, to just keep the profits rolling in for the capitalists. They do all kinds of stuff. What do you think the military-industrial complex is about? Do you think it's just that, they're just greedy? And it's that, but it's also that the U.S. economy would shut down because of overproduction. But part of what keeps the U.S. economy churning along is that the government spends loads and loads of money on tanks and bombs and weapons and drones and all kinds of things. And that pumps money into the economy and deals with the problem of overproduction. John Maynard Keynes, and that's why I can't stand libertarian economics. I really can't, because it's such a delusion. Right? I mean, capitalists know that doesn't work. That's why they created a Federal Reserve Bank, right? That's why JP Morgan put up the money and they met with people on Jekyll Island to create the Federal Reserve Bank, because they knew that their system was having panics and meltdowns every few years. That's why they created the FDIC. That's why, it's like there's a lot of things the government does that aren't even for us. It's just to help the capitalists continue making profits. Capitalism just left to its own devices is very, very, very unstable. And libertarians have it in their head that if we just have this pure magical capitalism, I one time a libertarian, they left a comment. They said the only monopolies that exist are created by the government. No. The government goes out of its way to break apart monopolies, right? Yeah, there are state-created monopolies like the MTA, right? There are government-created monopolies that exists, but the government goes out of its way to prevent monopolies. They break apart companies all the time in order to keep the market going. right? The natural tendency of the market is to monopoly, and the government is there to facilitate. That's why we have antitrust legislation. You can read about it. There's all kinds of mechanisms that have been created to try and keep capitalism productive, to deal with the problems that Marx wrote about: the general law of capitalist accumulation, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the problem of overproduction, or as it's called commonly, glut, G-L-U-T, glut, which is poverty created by abundance. There's a reason. I use this example many times. The government has buried 1.4 billion pounds of cheese in Springfield, Missouri. There's a cave in Springfield, Missouri, where the government purchases cheese and buries it. And why does it do that? Why? Because it's trying to keep the price of dairy from sinking, right? If left to its own devices, a gallon of milk might cost 2 cents at the store. And that sounds great. We all get milk for 2 cents, but then all the farmers go out of business. So in order to keep the price of milk at a rate that farmers can make a profit, the government buys huge amounts of milk and huge amounts of cheese and buries it in a mountain. That's insanity, but it's capitalism, right? This is all the things that libertarians don't understand, right? And they have it in their heads, oh, the market will just naturally fix it. No. The market has been around for a really long time. And the whole time the market has been there, there's been all kinds of problems. The government, like, why does the U.S. Constitution, here's a great example. The U.S. Constitution says that the U.S. government must maintain a post office. Why? In fact, let's read from the U.S. Constitution. Libertarians will like, I bet you've never read the Constitution. Yes, I have. Let's read it. U.S. Constitution, Postal Service. Let's read what it says, right? The Postal Clause of the U.S. Constitution. This is from the U.S. Constitution. I wonder how many libertarians do not know about this phrase. The Congress shall have the power to establish post offices and post roads. That is a direct line from the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 7. To establish post offices and post roads. That is in the Constitution. Why is that there? Why? Why did the founding fathers of the United States, why would they do such a crazy communist socialist thing? They want the government. They want the government to be in charge of the mail. That must be communist. Well, actually, there's a reason that they did it. You know why? Because if a private company ran our mail, that private company would have its own economic interest, correct? And there'd be companies that it would be competing with, correct? And so it would probably deliver the mail in a biased way. It would favor some businesses over others. And if you're going to have a business environment, one thing that's necessary for business is a post office. You have to have the mail. And if that mail is not run by the government, that is at least a little bit neutral, and we know they give special treatment to Amazon. We know that. They know they're not completely neutral. But the fact that the government has to at least be a little bit neutral, the post office isn't like a profit-seeking institution, that enables the mail to be like an equalizer that's not biased for one against the other, right? That's the idea, right? It's something that, as libertarian as the founding fathers were, as much as Thomas Jefferson loved his yeoman, he was like, we're going to have the government deliver the mail. We're not going to have a private company do it, because if a private company did it, it would be biased in one way or the other. Libertarians don't get that, right? Oh. 2004 orange. All right. All righty. But anyway, we shall resume. We shall resume where we left off. Why? I want it to go back. Comments, go back to the bottom. Oh, there we go. New comments. All right. Very, very good. Very, very good. Okay. Thoughts on Gus Hall's Bill of Rights Socialism? Well, Gus Hall's Bill of Rights Socialism, there's a pamphlet that the Communist Party, it was like one of the only pamphlets they would ever hand out in Cleveland. It was called Bill of Rights Socialism USA. And, it's basically socialism with American characteristics. I think it was written more in the context of the Cold War. And I think he came up with the concept in the 60s, Bill of Rights socialism. It's what the Communist Party, if you talk to the Communist Party USA, they would say, we're in favor of Bill of Rights socialism. And the reason they would say that is because most people believed in the United States that communism was synonymous with suppression of civil liberties. Right? That's a really common. I remember hearing that when I was a kid, right? That people thought communism meant dictatorship. Communism just means suppression of civil liberties. So the Communist Party, in order to communicate that they wanted civil liberties, they would say, well, we're for Bill of Rights socialism. And then Gus Hall would say, the American people wouldn't accept the U.S. Constitution without a Bill of Rights. They won't accept socialism without it either. If you read it, it's basically, Gus Hall is just kind of saying in the pamphlet, look, we believe in civil liberties. We believe in freedom of speech. We believe in freedom of religion. We believe in these things, and that other socialist countries may not have these things, but we believe that in the United States, when we have socialism, it'll have to have American freedoms in it. That's what he's saying. And that's more or less, he's more or less saying socialism with American characteristics. He's giving a special emphasis to civil liberties. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good piece of writing. Look, one thing about the Communist Party, even now, as hard as it is now to admit this, one thing I will say, even about the Communist Party, it's just part of their heritage. Their writing and their publications are way better because they were the Soviet-aligned party in the United States. They were representative of the Communist International, and they were aligned with the Soviet Union after the Communist International dissolved. And because of that, they had to act like a real political party. Now, we know that especially after McCarthyism, they were not that. They were a fringe element, and even in their stronger days, they were always like radical. They were not like a mainstream party. But because of the fact that they were aligned with a huge country called the Soviet Union, and they were aligned with a huge network of communist parties around the world, they couldn't act like buffoons. They had to act serious. Right. And that's why if you read Gus Hall's writings, I've got some of it here, right? You read, what is it? Working Class USA, The Power and the Movement. It's very coherent, right? Because if Gus Hall had acted like a buffoon, he would have been out of a job. The Soviet Union was going to make sure that, that they were, the guy who was representing their movement in the United States sounded like a real politician. You watch some of the ads that Gus Hall made on television. He sounds like a real politician. And that's one thing about the Communist Party USA. Even today, a lot of their literature, the way it's written, it sounds like a real political party, right? Go and read anything written by Bob Avakian. Go and read a Bob Avakian book. Does that sound serious politically? No, right? I mean, go to the RCP website. I'm going to just pull up the latest Bob Avakian article. I have no idea what it is, right? I have no idea what it is. I'm just going to pull up the latest Bob Avakian article. I'm going to read it to you, right? And I can, and you will understand. You will understand what I'm talking about, right? Important statement by Bob Avakian. In my statement of August 1st last year, I put forward the analysis that in particular circumstances, this presidential election and the truly profound stakes posted, if the Trump-Pence regime remained in power at the time of the election, it would be necessary for the important vote of Biden to deliver a decisive electoral defeat to fascism represented by this regime. Holy shit, that is a run-on sentence. At the same time, I mean, but there you go. Let's get into some of his theoretical work. I mean, it's gobbledygook, right? It's like incoherent, ultra revolutionary sounding gobbledygook, right? I mean, a lot of Bob's stuff, you read it, it's gobbledygook, right? It's he's got, what is it? This book about, oh goodness, the what is it? Crocodiles cannot give birth to song sparrows. The Soviet Union would never have allowed themselves to be represented by this. Birds cannot give birth to crocodiles. That is the name of one of his books. The Soviet Union would never have been represented by somebody who put out a book with a title like that, right? Yeah, I mean, here we go. The new synthesis is in a real sense a work in progress, as I am still actively applying myself to leading to learning from many sources. Hopefully, this new synthesis will continue to further develop and enrich ongoing work in the theoretical realm of the dialectical relation to the further developments in the world, particularly the advance of revolutionary struggle whose ultimate aim is a communist world. But it is incorrect to say that as a result of the work I carried out over a number of decades, summing up the experience of the communist revolution and socialist states and drawing from many diverse spheres of human activity and thought, there is already a further qualitative development in the science of communism that is embodied by the fundamental orientation, method, approach, core elements, and new synthesis. Because of the importance of what this represents, the importance of presenting this in the form of both concise and concentrated as well as accurate rendering, to the service as a grounding basic guideline to encourage and facilitate the further engagement of this new synthesis, I have written the following outline. I mean, it's like, try to make sense of the new synthesis. Like it's gobbledygook, right? The Soviet Union would never have allowed, but the Communist Party never, they always were very to the point because they had to act like a real political party, right? Let's watch a Gus Hall ad here, right? I mean, Gus Hall had to appear, he had to wear a suit. He had to appear like a real presidential candidate. Here's a Gus Hall ad, right? Here's one of his very few times he had an ad on television. But we'll put it on. Well, this is a Gus Hall campaign ad, right? Right, this is from 1972. This is a television ad for the Communist Party. Compare it to anything Bob Avakian has ever done. I don't even know what that means, but hey, that's cool. I think that's someone's saying I'm cool or something. So I'll take it. All righty. Thank you for the super chat. But yeah, here, this is a Gus Hall ad, right? This is one thing about the Communist Party that I will commend them for. This sounds like a real candidate.
There's no question we have the best program.
Gus Hall, General Secretary of the Communist Party, is the communist candidate for president. A former steel worker, he has been a union organizer and strike leader. And now, Gus Hall.
Good evening. Tomorrow the votes will be cast and counted. The 1972 elections will be history, but the issues will continue to be with us. In the past weeks, we have seen a flurry of activity about peace in Vietnam, and frankly, it is still in grave doubt. As welcome as peace is, whenever it is achieved, the American people have a right to know why it has taken 4 years, the lives of 22,000 Americans, and 1 million Vietnamese, 13 million bombs, and $60 billion. Peace could have been attained the day Nixon was inaugurated. The basic proposals which the Nixon administration has now agreed to were proposed by the North Vietnamese even before Nixon was elected president. The only thing that has changed is that President Nixon now faces an election. After 4 years of escalated aggression and non-continuous reneging on terms he's already agreed to, how can anyone trust Nixon to carry out the agreement after November 7th? The fact is that whichever of the two candidates wins tomorrow, our country's problems will not disappear. 40% of the workers' wages will still go for taxes, while over a third of the big corporations will continue to pay no taxes at all. A third of our people will still be living in rat-infested slum housing. The elderly will still suffer neglect. Poverty will continue to grow like a slow cancer. The government will continue to pour billions of dollars into tanks, guns, warplanes, and bombs. The ugly specter of racist oppression, now fanned by Nixon's open racist appeals, will continue to poison and stalk the land. Wages of workers will sink even deeper into the Arctic wage freeze, while prices, taxes, and rents will continue to skyrocket. And you can be sure corporate profits will continue to set new records. The Republican and Democratic candidates have not presented any meaningful new solutions, and they never can, because they are hogtied to the system of corporate profits. Meaningful solutions must of necessity step on the toes of big business. Corporate godfathers always squeal when you make them pay the taxes. We communists are unalterably against the system of corporate profits, which breeds wars of aggression, racism, and poverty. In this struggle, it is necessary not only to step on the toes of the monopoly corporations, but it's necessary to step on their necks. We are for dismantling big business power and replacing it with people's power. In this election, as always, there is a choice between a more reactionary and a more liberal candidate, but both basically represent the interest of big business. We say the time is ripe for political independence, the only path to people's power. In the 72 elections, the Communist Party serves as that people's alternative. A vote for the communist candidate is a vote against an ultra-right, racist, anti-labor lame duck Nixon. A vote for the communist candidate is more than just a protest vote. It is a vote against poverty, war, racism, and exploitation, but it is also a vote for positive action for working class unity, the unity of blacks, Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, Indian, and white working people. It is the one vote that expresses the people's outrage at the steady decay of overall quality of life. A vote for the communist candidate is a vote of struggle, a struggle for a better life. Thank you.
Tomorrow, make your vote count. Vote for the communist candidates, Gus Hall for president, Jarvis Tyner for vice president, and the local communist candidates. If they're not on the ballot in your state, write in the names Gus Hall and Jarvis Tyner. For more information, write to 23 West 26th Street, New York, New York.
That's still their office. Anyway, but, you know, or here's a much shorter ad from Gus Hall. And I mean, you'll know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, there's a much shorter ad here.
Communist Party presidential candidate.
There was an old song that went, everything is higher, it's sure outrageous. Yes, everything is higher except my daddy's wages. Yes, everything is higher, and it is outrageous. Taxes, unemployment, racism, rent gouging, meat and grocery prices, all of these troubles pile higher with each new year, while the incumbent politicians try to show what? That there is a decrease in the rate of increase, that the problems are not getting worse as fast as before. Re-election of Nixon will be a disaster for working people, but the election of McGovern will not cure these problems either. Working people need a working people's alternative. This year, the alternative on the ballot is the Communist Party. It is the most meaningful vote in 1972.
Yeah, I mean, he sounds like a real political leader, right? I mean, that's what I admire about the Communist Party. And that's why reading their books and their literature is much more productive, because even though they were fringe, they had to some degree or other, act like a serious political party. Gus Hall had to put on a suit and tie and give a speech that made sense, right? And because they were held to higher standards, they had to act like a real political party, right? And that is one thing about the Communist Party that I've always admired, is that even after they stopped being a real political party, they act like it. And if you go to their website is very professional. It's very well put together. And their ideas are bullshit, but they state them very clearly. They can tell you what they believe in, what they advocate, and that is what we need. And you listen to Bob Avakian talking about crocodiles and birds, and, I mean, there's something about all of this, right? I've often used this book, This book, The History of American Trotskyism, right? It's by James Cannon. James Cannon was the founder of American Trotskyism. And you read this book. It's an interesting book. I learned a lot from reading it, but it's a series of monologues that James Cannon gave to an audience in the 1950s. And it's like he gave a series of speeches about the history of Trotskyism. It's full of jokes, and it's full of little stories, little cute little stories, and little anecdotes, and little rumors, and little times. And there's an element of it's like he's a guru. It's a cult of personality. right? And I guess to some degree or other, you need gurus, you need entertainers, you need, people that you think are fun to listen to. But when you listen to this, it gives you the vibe of, this is not a serious politician, right? This is a performer. This is an entertainer. This is a guru. This is a, and you need that to some degree or other. This isn't necessarily bad, but it gives you a different vibe. Gus Hall books don't sound like this. Gus Hall books sound different, and to be fair, like there's nothing wrong with a book like this, right? And that sometimes this is the right tone. But if you read this, this is different than like a campaign pamphlet by a serious political party. This is James Cannon. He's up there. It's almost like a one man play, a monologue, right? And he's up there and he's telling jokes, and he tells the story of like back when the Trotskyites were getting started. Everyone who didn't fit in with the Communist Party joined them, and there was some guy who wanted to join who had a crazy green felt suit and he had a long beard, and they wouldn't let him in because he looked crazy. And I mean, he's telling little stories and anecdotes, and it's interesting, it's amusing, but it's not that kind of professional thing. The Communist Party in their literature, I mean, I'm sure they have books like this too, honestly. Maybe what I'm saying doesn't make sense here, but this kind of thing, this is not what like a serious political party publishes. This is more like what a cult of personality, a guru, right, might publish something like this, right? You can see one of these Eastern mystics publishing something like this. A spiritual leader might publish something like this. But, when you're participating in elections and you have a mass party, you communicate in a very different manner. I hope that made some sense, right? And I'm not against people doing this, right? And a lot of what I do on these streams is like that. A lot of what I do on here is I'm telling little stories, I'm telling jokes, I'm speaking in funny voices and all this, but I'm not running for president. And I'm not pretending that CPI is a party. We would like to be part of a party, someday, but we're not a party. We're just an educational group. We're carrying out socialist education. So there you go. All right. Your thoughts on the Twitter file revelations versus state-run media in other countries. Well, this is what I'll say about that, right? Because this must be said. I am so tired of it's like RT is state media, Press TV is state media, but CBS, MSNBC, Twitter, Facebook, that's just, they're just completely independent. It's like, we know managing the media has been a part of the American government and the intelligence agencies. Project Mockingbird, that's one of the main things American intelligence agencies do is handle the media. It was admitted in the Washington Post that Anderson Cooper, his career with CNN began with the CIA. That's not a secret. And it's, again, their response if you bring this up, tinfoil hat. No, it's not tinfoil hat. And it's really not, right? The idea that the intelligence agencies might help craft media narratives in a way that's sympathetic to them. They've done a lot more sinister stuff. Read about Project MK Ultra. They've done a lot worse stuff than just crafting media narratives, right? So, I mean, it's just, yes, mainstream media in the United States is very much state media. All right. Iran and Saudi relations. Huge breakthrough. China did it. I spoke about it for quite some time in the opening of the stream, and it's a great thing that China did. My hope is that it can lead to peace in Yemen. I'm very, very happy about Iran and Saudi Arabia, and I explained it all in the opening. Go back and watch the opening. But there you go. Kim is not a conservative. The lockdown left calls her that because she doesn't toe the line. Okay, well, I'll have to look at more of her stuff. I mean, I've seen different things, but it's not my job to tell Kim what her political category is. And I consider her to be an anti-imperialist. She's much more anti-war around Russia and Ukraine than anybody in the mainstream ever is. I love that about her. She's critical of the mainstream media. She's critical of the deep state. So I'm a fan of Kim, but yeah, I a lot of what she says strikes me as a bit more conservative, but that's okay. I don't care, right? I don't care. She was at Rage Against the War Machine. That's awesome. Good for her. And I went on her show and she gave me a platform. Awesome. I'm way past the left-right stuff. I'm really past it. At this point, right? Because, I mean, at this point, it's about fighting U.S. imperialism. It's about fighting their state, So, I mean, the left and right thing, I mean, it's not interested. Why do you think 2 tourists were killed in Mexico? I haven't looked into that specific incident, so I can't speak to that specific incident. Mexico has an ongoing problem of crime, and drug cartels and such. And, I mean, it's not good. And my heart goes out to those people and their families. And I really don't know the specifics of the situation. So there you go. Next question, the Orange Revolution. Yeah, 2004. Look, Ukraine has, since the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine has had different governments. In the western parts of Ukraine, they blame the United States, or they blame Russia for all of their problems. And in the eastern parts of the country, they blame the fall of the Soviet Union. One section of the country of Ukraine feels very much that Ukraine's difficulties are because the Soviet Union fell. Another section of Ukraine thinks that all their problems were caused by the Soviet Union. There's strong differences in Ukraine among the population. In 2004, it looked like Ukraine was getting closer to Russia. Putin was in power in Russia, and Ukraine was drifting more in the pro-Russia place. And so the NGOs and and they engineered the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, the Orange Revolution. Now, after the Orange Revolution, eventually you got Yanukovych, and Yanukovych was very much balancing. He was kind of a neutral guy, but he was starting to drift closer to Putin just because Putin was giving him a better deal. And that's when then later, in 2014, the USA once again toppled the Ukrainian government. The Orange Revolution was against a government in Ukraine that was much more solidly pro-Russian than Yanukovych was. Yanukovych was starting to drift closer to Russia, but he was more like balancing. There are different forces in Ukraine, right? I mean, and this is one thing that like drives me up the wall, is that this narrative that people have about communism. I never, ever in my life when I hear someone say, but haven't you ever talked to anyone who actually lived under communism? Oh, shut up. I'm so sick of hearing that. In every former socialist country, poll after poll after poll shows that people say life was better. In Russia, Soviet nostalgia is widespread. In Romania and Czechoslovakia, even in East Germany, there are people who say life was better. So whenever, haven't you ever talked to anyone? Shut up. Shut up. I am so tired of hearing that from people. And it's this arrogant, only a dumb American says that, right? It's this smug, like, I met a guy who ran away. I met a Miami Cuban, so I know everything there is to know about communism. No, you met somebody who fled to the country that has been trying to destroy their country. Look, if I got so mad at the American government that I packed up all my belongings and moved to China, do you think a Chinese person would talk to me and that my version of events, I would represent how all Americans felt about the country? Of course not. I would represent the views of somebody who was so angry at the American government, they packed up and they moved out of the country. And that's what people don't get. And it is the most smug, arrogant statement. Haven't you ever talked? Yes, I've actually been to Russia. I've been to Venezuela. I've been to Nicaragua. Yeah, I've been to these countries. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's, and then the funny thing is, in Russia these days, do you know who votes for the Communist Party? That was one thing. I covered the Communist Party in the 2018 elections. I was embedded with their campaign. I was at their election office on election night. And you know what everyone told me? The Communist Party is the party of pensioners, old folks, the ones who actually lived under it. They're the ones who vote for the Communist Party. It should be the old people should be the ones who definitely wouldn't. No, it's older people vote for the Communist Party in way bigger numbers than the younger people do. It's this most arrogant, smug statement, right? And people say it to you with this assumption that you couldn't possibly know anything that they don't know, right? They talked to a Cuban guy who lives down the street from them, who told them that Fidel Castro eats babies. So you couldn't possibly, you being a communist, you couldn't possibly know anything they don't know. You couldn't possibly have access to any information. You must just be so stupid you never talked to a Cuban American before. You must just be so stupid you never talked to some old guy from Slovenia who thinks Hitler was great because he fought those Russians or something. Yeah, it's like, it is the most smug condescension, right? It never occurs to these people that, like, calling yourself a communist in the United States, which is not a popular position to take, might be based on actually, like, knowing things, being familiar with information that's not widespread. is just assume you must be an idiot because everyone agrees with the government. Everyone agrees with mainstream media. It's infuriating. It's really, really infuriating, right? It's really, really infuriating. Another thing I never want to hear is the same people. It's, haven't you ever talked to anybody? Actually, I've been to the countries, and the people in those countries say it was better. And, same people, they always say to you, this is my favorite. Well, I have this original thought about communism that I thought of all completely on my own. And it's very original. And it goes like this: human nature. Shut up. That's what we've all been told about communism since we were 3. Well, the problem is human nature. And people pass that off as if it's something they thought of. It's so annoying, right? And I get people, well, I used to believe in communism, Caleb, but then I realized human nature. No, you don't. No, you didn't. I heard that when I was in 3rd grade too, and in 1st grade, and in 5th grade. We've all heard that. Shut up. If I ever hear about human nature from another one of these people, well, it's the problem is human nature. Yeah, very original, very profound. And they try to pass it off like it's their original thought. Well, I realized that human nature, and it's like humans behave in different circumstances, right? The human nature, what was the human nature of animals, of people in hunter-gatherer cave times? What was the human nature of people in feudalism? Like, humans behave in different circumstances. And it's like that, and then when you talk about what it is communists actually advocate, we don't advocate everyone get paid the same wage. We're talking about public ownership of the means of production. So it's like this argument someone thought of. It's like, well, communists want everyone to get paid the exact same wage, no matter how hard they work. And that would be good. They want everyone to share absolutely everything. That would be good, but we're just greedy and it just wouldn't work. It's like, we don't advocate that. We advocate dictatorship of the proletariat, public control of the means of production, different income inequality. There's plenty of income inequality in China, etc. Number one. And number two, human beings behave differently in different circumstances, and people would get paid different. It's like it comes from a place of extreme ignorance, but it's combined with this arrogance because they don't know anything about what they're talking about, but they assume that you must not either. And that's the annoying part. It's okay not to know. I can forgive people for not knowing. We live in the United States. Why would you know anything about communism? But they assume that you must, like, you couldn't possibly know anything about communism that they don't know. You couldn't possibly have read anything you just must never have talked to the Cuban guy down the street. You must never have heard the kindergarten teacher say human nature. It's really annoying. It's really, really annoying. I get really annoyed with the arrogance of these people. It's really, really annoying. The second largest political party in Russia is the Communist Party. And you are correct. You are correct. And but they lived under it. They should know how horrible it is because everybody knows. Everybody knows. It's just like that thing about, can you take off your tinfoil hat? Everybody knows. It's like, there you go. There you go. Sorry to get so negative, folks. I get really annoyed with the arrogance. It is this assumption that I couldn't possibly, no one could possibly know anything. I mean, it's really annoying to listen to because it's like, if you take this stuff seriously, if you feel that we have a responsibility to build a better world, you should try to do something about it. You should engage. And it's like just engaging on even a basic level with what we have to say would debunk these arguments, but no one bothers to do that. And they just assume that you couldn't possibly know anything. It's very, very annoying. It's very, very annoying. I know we're trying to be more mainstream here. We're trying to be able to have more mainstream conversations, but I just get very annoyed when I'm dealing with people that don't know and don't want to know, right? It's okay to not know, but when you don't want to know, and you assume that no one else could know anything. And it's just, I find that to be very, very obnoxious. But anyway, folks, I am going to put on the closing music. It's been a great stream. And I'll be back soon. If not tomorrow night, the next night. I'm always on here streaming. But one last time, please come to the conference. Please come to the conference. The Summit Against Hypocrisy. We need you there. Link is down below. If you can't make it, send us a donation. The donate link is down below. We absolutely need you there. I'm talking with another big name person tomorrow. Can't tell you who they are because they're not confirmed yet. We may even have even more big names than we already have. We got Scott Ritter already. We got Nick Brana already. We got Garland Nixon already. We got Jyoti Brar already. And we might even have one more big name. I mean, it's like, and I'm Part of me is worried about how we're going to cover all the expenses and everything, but we're doing this conference because CPI is marching ahead. We got shit to do. Peter Coffin is going to be there. Music, speeches. It is going to be a kick-ass event. It's going to be a kick-ass event. We need you there. All right, folks. I'll just say it tonight. Since I quoted from that statement earlier, I'll just say it. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night, everybody. We need a government of action to fight for working families. A government of action to fight for working families. All right, folks. Have a good night.